Chapter 644. Mother, mother. Ah! Princess Raimu screamed at the sky crazily. She no longer called her Mother Empress, because she felt that the word Mother Empress was the greatest insult to her mother. That man was not fit to be her mother's man. I don't want the identity he gave me. I don't want it. The cold night was like ice, and her heart was like a cold night. Jun Imo Xia returned to his courtyard as soon as the lively family banquet was over. This period of time was a rare period of peace. But young Master Jun still needed to find time to practice his medicine and martial arts. And he couldn't afford to slack off on these matters. It had to be said that Jun Dashao was too popular recently. Just before he left, Dongfang Wenxin's eyes were full of love and reluctance, and Dugu Xiaoyi even pouted and refused to let him go. They almost followed him to the courtyard. Guan Qinghan glanced at him, but because the elders were present, she did not say anything. Even that glance was as indifferent as usual. However, Jun Moxie automatically thought too much. Why did she look at me? Could it be? He couldn't help but feel excited. There was also the little Princess Han Yen Menghan. She endured her embarrassment and finished the meal. She actually did not leave and stayed until the end of the banquet. Only then did she angrily glare at Jun Moxie and bared her teeth in a threatening manner. However, one sentence from Jun Moxie made the little girl flee. Am I good looking? Am I good to look at? If it's not enough, you can come and warm the bed tonight. Anyway, it's only a matter of time. Thus, the little girl threw away her armor and ran away like a wisp of smoke, disappearing without a trace. As he walked to the entrance of the courtyard, Jun Moxie was stunned. Why didn't he hear Yi Gahan's roar today? Ever since the two little guys, Tian Kan, DK, and Bailey Luo Yun, were brought back by Ling Ao, they had been living here. Other than practicing, they were learning sword skills from Yi Gahan. In fact, it was not appropriate to say that they were learning sword skills. The sword skills that Jun Dashao knew were much higher than Yi Gahan's. Therefore, the two little ones learned most from Yi Gahan in terms of combat experience and adaptability. And most importantly, even though Jun Moxie was knowledgeable, he was not a crippled person. He could not compare to a crippled but not crippled martial artist like Yi Gahan. Yi Guhan would appear at the side to give them pointers as soon as they started to practice their swordsmanship. Although the swordsmanship of the two had come from Jun Imo Xia, and the level of the swordsmanship itself was far beyond the scope of Yi Guhan's field of vision, Yi Guhan had traveled all over the world, and his combat experience was exceptionally rich. Usually, the two little mistakes would be pointed out by him immediately, followed by a merciless reprimand. The two of them were determined people to begin with. In the face of their own mistakes, they did not shy away from it and repeatedly practiced it until they were correct, skillful, and perfect. In order to further increase the cultivation of the two little ones, Jun Imo Xia had also used his own pure spiritual energy to imbue them with a series of muscles and bones. So in these few days, with many aspects improving simultaneously, the strength of the two little ones naturally increased by leaps and bounds, improving by leaps and bounds. In addition, after they learned ventriloquism, they were naturally extremely excited after not speaking for a long time. They chattered non-stop. They were not born mute, it was only because their tongues were cut off that they could not speak again. Now that they could speak again, they naturally wanted to talk to their heart's content. But that kind of situation, even Jun Moxie felt a little creeped out. The two little ones sat facing each other, and neither of them spoke, but the sound of their conversation would suddenly appear in the empty space. It was almost as if there was a ghost. In these few days, Yi Gahan's newly created one-armed sword skill had also reached the stage of completion. Although Yi Gahan did not have enough profound energy and could not use it freely, and its power was inevitably greatly reduced, he clearly knew that the one-armed sword skill that was created from the foundation of Jun Moxie's one-armed sword skill was much more powerful than the original sword skill. Because this set of sword skill contained too much of Yi Gahan's own death aura and solemnity. The biggest characteristic of this set of sword skill was its sharpness to the extreme. Moreover, because it was wielded with only one arm, the angle of each sword was unimaginable, and all stabbed from impossible directions. If he were to fight against an expert of the same level, he would definitely have the upper hand, especially against an opponent who was 2 levels higher than him. Even if he were to fight against an expert who was 2 levels higher, he would still be able to cause his opponent to panic. Yi Guhan was very proud of himself for being able to create such a set of sword skill, and he was also very confident. But tonight, the 2 youngsters were still practicing their sword skills, but Yi Guhan did not stand by the side to guide them. His bleak figure stood under the flowering tree, and from time to time, he would frown as he paced back and forth. He was actually very irritated, and seemed to have a very bad temperament. This kind of negative emotion had not appeared in him for a long time, and it was naturally very unusual to see it today.
During the time that he stayed in the June residence, from the time he was injured to the time he recovered, from the time he was dispirited due to his lack of Xian Qi, to the time when he saw the sword skill with only one arm, Yi Guhan had always been a man of few words, and his face was always as indifferent as Langlang's. In addition, his personality was also very eccentric, and it was very rare for him to interact with anyone other than the 2 youngsters. Even when the 3rd master, Jun Wui, took the initiative to talk to him, it was rare for him to say a few words. But at least he no longer had that feeling of despair when he was injured, and there was a little more vitality in him. But today, on this New Year's Eve, this death aura that had already dissipated appeared on his body again. It appeared on Yi Guhan's body. Even Yi Guhan felt somewhat abnormal. In fact, he felt very uncomfortable. What's wrong with me today? Today was the New Year's Eve, and it was the time to relax, but why was he always upset? No matter what he did, he was absent-minded, and even the words he said were wrong. He often stopped talking, and when he wanted to continue, he couldn't remember what he wanted to say at all, but there was one thing that was very clear. Yi Guhan only felt that the shadow of Murong Xiu Xiu in his heart was getting clearer and clearer. Usually, he could forcibly suppress this longing, but tonight, at this special time, it was so uncontrollable. In the haze, it seemed that Murong Xiu Xiu was slowly walking towards him with a smile. Her eyebrows were picturesque, and she was smiling sweetly, just like her innocent and playful appearance 18 years ago. But when Yi Guhan wanted to extend his arm to hug her, she floated away in an instant, leaving only a pair of sad and helpless eyes, as if she was pleading for something. Xiu Xiu. What's wrong with you? Is it you? Is it you? What do you want to say? What do you want to say? Yi Guhan held his head in pain and turned back and forth frantically. There seemed to be a fire burning in his heart, and there was also a knife twisting in it. He seemed to have noticed something, but it didn't seem like there was anything. There seemed to be some hint in the haze, but Yi Guhan felt that he couldn't break through the layer of fog in front of him no matter what. Jun Moxie walked over slowly, and when he saw Yi Guhan's appearance, he couldn't help but be startled. What's wrong with this affectionate person today? At this moment, Yi Guhan finally couldn't stand it anymore. He strode over, and his eyes flashed with madness. Jun Sunshao, can you take me to the palace? Yi Guhan's tone was admittedly sincere, but it was mixed with indescribable extreme irritation. He only knew that he wanted to kill someone at this moment. His heart was inexplicably irritable. In fact, he was extremely irritable. In fact, Yi Guhan felt that he would have bitten and eaten his enemy if he had been in front of him.
Go to the palace? For what? Today is New Year's Eve, it's not convenient, right? Jun Moxie frowned, and looked at him in amusement. Has this brother's unrequited love gone berserk? Go to the palace at this time? Do you want to embarrass yourself? With your image, do you want to go to someone else's territory and humiliate yourself? At this moment, Jun Moxie's expression inexplicably tightened, and his complexion became exceptionally heavy. He could clearly feel a hidden and powerful aura rushing over from the direction of the palace, and its target was the Jun family's residence. He could also hear the rapid sound of horse hooves coming from that direction. Did something really happen? Jun Mo Xia didn't have the time to pay attention to Yi Guhan. In the next moment, he had already appeared at the top of the tower. He raised his eyes and looked into the distance. Just as he climbed up the tower, a shrill scream pierced the night sky. The place where the scream was coming from was not far from the Jun family's residence. Jun Moxie's heart shook, and he immediately activated the Yin-Yang escape, and appeared at the scene of the incident. He just happened to see a whirlwind of shadows attacking a group of people and horses. Jun Moxie recognized the palanquin at a glance. It was the Empress palanquin. The Empress had often visited the Jun family's residence, and although she hadn't visited for a long time, her unique ceremonial guard was still recognizable. As for the blurry shadow, Jun Moxie also recognized it as Mr. Wen. Looking at the direction of the palanquin, it was heading towards the Jun family's residence. And the Emperor's close friend was attacking the palanquin of the current Empress. What did this mean? The answer was obvious: the Empress must have come to harm the Emperor. Otherwise, she wouldn't have taken such drastic measures to kill the Empress. To harm the Emperor. The Empress' destination was the Jun family's residence. That meant it was beneficial to the Jun family. Otherwise, why would the Emperor send a master to kill his Empress? Although it was only a glimpse, Jun Xie had already understood the situation in an instant, therefore, Jun Moxie acted immediately. However, when he arrived, Mr. Wen had already launched that palm attack. Although Jun Moxie tried his best to stop it, he was too far away, and the best time to stop it had already passed. So, he could only stop most of the Empress power, and the remaining 20 to 30% of the pure Xian Qi inevitably hit the Empress back. Although it was only 20 to 30% of the Empress power, it was not easy to deal with the power of a great master. Even a powerhouse like Tian Xian might not be able to resist it. Jun Moxie was furious. He shouted, "Wen Songyu! You're courting death!" His voice was moving, and he dashed towards the Empress like a sharp arrow. Mr. Wen's attack was successful, and he wanted to retreat. Jun Moxie had already arrived here, and there was no room for him to act. Moreover, he had already launched a palm attack, and it had hit the target. His mission was completed. From now on, the sky was high and the sea was wide, and it had nothing to do with him anymore. However, he couldn't leave at this moment. Jun Xie swooped over like a hawk. He hadn't even arrived, but his powerful aura had already made it hard for him to breathe. Mr. Wen was startled. He brandished his sword with all his strength, and a cold sword light shot out from it. It was aimed at Jun Xie. Mr. Wen retreated at the same time. He brandished his sword in a frenzy as he retreated. Two large trees on either side of the road were suddenly cut in half. Then, the huge trunks of the trees, which were covered in thick snow, rushed towards Jun Xie. The large amount of snow was like a natural barrier, blocking everyone's line of sight. As long as he could block Jun Moxie, Mr. Wen was confident that he could escape immediately. Jun Moxie snorted coldly, and activated the power of wood to cover his whole body. Shwa! He passed through the crown of the first tree without any obstruction, and didn't change his direction at all. He passed through the middle of the trunk, and left a big round hole in it. Jun Moxie's body was already on the second tree. The trunk behind him exploded with a bang. The trunk in front of him was like a bamboo pole that had been smashed by a hammer, and cracked into the shape of a trumpet flower. Jun Moxie's body had already passed through the trunk, and appeared in front of Mr. Wen. Mr. Wen was startled. He hadn't expected that Jun Moxie's speed wouldn't be affected at all. However, he was still a supreme master, so he didn't panic even though he was startled. He shouted loudly, and brandished his sword. However, Jun Moxie's figure had already pounced into his bosom by the time the sword light flashed. Then, he felt a sharp pain in his arm, and his sword flew out of his hand with a clang. Sound! It turned into a streamer of light in the air, and didn't know where it had gone. Then, a bang! Sound was heard as his shoulder was chopped by Jun Moxie's palm. At the same time, a thunderous knee struck his lower abdomen, and then his lower abdomen. Suddenly, Mr. Wen felt a deluge of dizziness, and vomited a mouthful of blood. He felt as if his internal organs were on fire, and his Xian Qi was in a mess inside his body. His profound and pure Xian Qi couldn't be used at this moment. In less than a tenth of a blink of an eye, Mr. Wen had gone from having the upper hand against the Empress to having fallen into a boundless hell. Then, June Moxie suddenly disappeared in front of him, and the back of his neck tightened. He felt as if someone had grabbed him by the neck, and the wind whistled in his ears. Then, a bang sound was heard, and Mr. Wen's body fell down from the air. June Moxie had appeared in front of Princess Raimo, because he had heard Princess Raima's heart-wrenching and mournful cries. June Moxie's fingers touched the Empress' wrist, and a wisp of pure Xian Qi seeped into her body. Both of Princess Ling Meng's knees had been shattered into pieces, and there was a large wound on the back of her head. All of these injuries were not light, and blood had covered her entire body. However, she didn't seem to feel the slightest bit of pain. She knelt on the ice-cold ground with her shattered knees, and only knew how to hug her mother tightly. She looked at June Mo Xia with a pair of pleading eyes, and begged helplessly, "June, save my mother." June Moxie's heart sank as soon as he touched the Empress' hand. His face turned gloomy. He hadn't expected that the Empress' injuries would be so serious. Her internal organs had been ruptured, and her heart had been shattered. There was nothing he could do to save her. With June Moxie's control of the Hongjun Pagoda's limited power, he couldn't do anything about such serious injuries. The art of unlocking heaven's fortune had the ability to seize the fortune of heaven and earth, but it was still difficult to save such injuries. If June Moxie hadn't used his own Xian Qi to extend the Empress' last bit of life force, the Empress would have perished. The great master stage experts seemed to be unable to withstand a single blow from Mei Shuiyan and June Moxie. But it was only because their opponents were too terrifying, and they couldn't resist. In reality, they stood at the peak of the Xian continent. Although there were stronger existences above them, in a general sense, they were already the most terrifying existences. Even though June Mo Xia had blocked most of the power of the Great Master's attack, the Empress, who was a weak woman with a cultivation of not even silver Xian, would still not be able to withstand the remaining power of the attack. June Moxie sighed. Pure Xian Qi surged into the Empress' meridians without any regard for the consequences. It wrapped around her broken internal organs, completely cutting off the connection with her other organs, and preserved her last breath. Although this method couldn't save her life, it could still support her last breath, so that she wouldn't die on the spot. But this method was only a temporary solution. It couldn't last for long, and could only last for the time it takes to drink a cup of tea. June Mo Xia hadn't considered the June family's purpose in doing this. He hadn't considered the Empress' purpose either. He had only thought of Yi Guhan. That infatuated man. June Moxie felt that he had the obligation to let them see each other one last time. No wonder Yi Guhan was so anxious, abnormal, and restless just now. It turned out to be because of this. Could it be that this was the so-called psychological connection between lovers? How much love does one have to have for such a psychological connection to appear? 18 years of longing, no regrets. 18 years of separation, this heart has not changed. June Moxie felt that he should not be completely indifferent to this infatuation. At this moment, his stubborn evil nature broke out. He didn't care that the woman in front of him was the Empress. He only knew that Murong Xiu and Yi Guhan were a pair of lovers. If he could help, he would help. What identity, etiquette, and morality? June Moxie didn't consider it at all. Not at all. After wrapping the Empress' internal organs with Xian Qi, June Moxie looked up to the sky and roared, "Yi Guhan." He tried his best to control his voice. When it came out of his mouth, it was quite calm, so as not to shock Murong Xiu. After it spread out, it suddenly exploded in the night sky, rushing towards the June family's courtyard. Murong Xiu's dim eyes suddenly brightened after hearing June Moxie shout this name. Endless expectation and longing flashed in her eyes. At this moment, two long roars rose into the sky at the same time. Solitary Eagle and Feng Wanyan flew over at the same time and landed beside June Moxie. Right now, the strength of these two people had already reached the level of a superior supreme. Seeing the situation in front of them, they were shocked. The ominous feeling in Yi Guhan's heart became stronger. At this moment, he also heard June Moxie's roar. Almost without hesitation, Yi Guhan rushed out crazily. His long hair suddenly spread out and danced in the wind. It was full of desolation and desolation. From afar, he saw June Moxie squatting on the ground. He seemed to be holding something in his arms. Yi Guhan's rapid breathing suddenly stopped. He only felt that there was a blockage in his chest. His mind was blank. He had obviously realized something. He no longer had any consciousness and only knew that he was running for his life. When he was in front of him, all of a sudden, everything in the world lost its color. In his eyes, there was only a face and a pair of eyes left. She had forced herself to lift her cheeks. Her eyes were still as gentle as before. But now, she no longer concealed her affection when she saw Yi Guhan. She looked at him tenderly and affectionately. Her eyes were filled with indescribable longing, reluctance, and endless guilt. Little Han. Morong Shou tried her best to keep her voice from trembling. She looked at Yi Guhan without blinking. She was afraid that if she blinked, she would never see that familiar yet strange face again. Shou. Yi Guhan's body swayed. His face suddenly turned pale. He took half a step forward weakly. Suddenly, his body turned soft and he knelt down heavily. He put his cheek in front of Morong Shou and looked at the face that he had missed for 18 years. Shou. Who is it? Who hurt you? You. Before he could finish his sentence, he suddenly felt a sweetness in his throat. A mouthful of blood came up, but he swallowed it. He was used to seeing death, so how could he not see that Morong Shou was on the verge of death? Little Han. I finally see you again. It's so good. Morong Shou looked longingly at Yi Guhan's face and softly said, Little Han. Do you know? I've been thinking of you every day, every moment, all these years. Tears began to gather in her eyes, but she used all her strength to hold them back, for fear that once the tears flowed out, she would no longer be able to see her sweetheart's face. Yi Guhan knelt in a daze and looked at her with warm and gentle eyes. He felt that his heart was empty and said in a daze, Shou, it doesn't hurt. I'm here. Morong Shou smiled with satisfaction. Her eyes revealed a little girl's expression and she said firmly, Yes, with you, I don't feel pain, and I'm not afraid. This was what Yi Guhan had said to comfort Morong Shou 20 years ago when they were in danger together. At that time, Morong Shou was injured. At that time, Morong Shou's reply was exactly the same. Because even though it had been more than 20 years, their relationship had never changed, just like that day, Little Han. Morong Shou wanted to raise her hand and touch his face, but she was powerless to do so. Yi Guhan carefully picked up her hand and placed it on his face, feeling the gentle touch. Finally, he could not help but burst into tears, soaking the warm jade hand. Little Han, don't cry. Morong Shou tried to move her fingers, wanting to wipe away his tears, but found that more and more tears were flowing. June Moxie, I know I'm going to die, but before I die, I want to tell you one thing. Morong Shou still looked at Yi Guhan's face and said softly, Blood Sword Hall is in the 3 camps of the Imperial Guards. June Moxie's body shook and he said in a low voice, Thank you. His hand was still holding Morong Shou's right hand at this moment. He was continuously injecting spiritual energy to support her and Yi Guhan's final farewell. Because the moment they separated, Morong Shou would leave this world. Little Han. I'm going. You have to take care of Raimu for me. Morong Shou revealed a sad smile, full of reluctance. Meng is a good child, but also a pitiful child. Yi Guhan's eyes were blurred with tears, but he did not make a sound. He bit his lips so hard that they bled. A stream of blood slowly flowed down, but he did not feel it. Morong Shou seemed to understand something. She sighed softly and rolled her eyes with difficulty. June Moxie. Please, for my sake, help me take care of Raimu. I entrust her, to you. She clearly saw the complicated look in June Moxie's eyes and begged weakly. Even if you really don't want to marry her, please take care of her. Please. I beg you. Her eyes were filled with hope as she looked at June Emosie's face. Her eyes were filled with endless pleading and longing. This was a mother's last wish for her daughter before she died. It was also her last wish that she couldn't let go of. June Moxie took a deep breath, increased the output of spiritual energy, and nodded silently. He had already felt that Morong Xiu's breath was getting weaker and weaker, and the meridians in her body were almost completely still. Even the divine art of unlocking heaven's fortune was getting more and more difficult to travel through her meridians. Morong Xiu's lips curled into a grateful and relieved smile, and she said sincerely, Thank you. Then, she turned her eyes, and gently looked at Yi Guhan. Her eyes were filled with endless infatuation. She didn't say a word. She still had the strength to speak, but she didn't need to. She didn't want to speak either. She only looked at him. She wanted to firmly remember this face before she died. She wanted to carve it into her soul, and become a brand. She wanted to carry this brand with her for all eternity. Yi Guhan didn't say anything. He let his tears flow down his cheeks as he looked at the beautiful woman in front of him. His gaze was firm and full of deep affection. The two of them looked at each other in a fixed manner. The gazes of the two pairs of eyes seemed to entangle each other's souls, never to be separated again. Suddenly, Morong Xiu's face flushed and her spirit was shaken. She suddenly used the last of her strength and murmured, looking forward. If we are not fated to meet in the next life. Suddenly, her body trembled and stopped. At this moment, her face was full of expectation, tenderness, and affection. Her eyes were still exuding endless affection and infatuation, but life had left her. The hand that was stroking Yi Guhan's face finally fell down powerlessly. Yi Guhan's tears flowed, but his expression suddenly became calm. In fact, it was frighteningly calm. His gaze was fixed on the gentle and beautiful face in front of him. Then, he slowly said the last line of the poem. I would rather betray the heavens than betray you. Xiu. He knelt and looked at Morong Xiu, who seemed to be in a deep sleep, and said calmly, June Moxie, there is a sword manual on the table beside my bed. I will leave it to you. Raimo, I will also leave it to you, please. June Moxie wanted to say something, but it was all stuck in his throat and he could not speak for a while. Yi Guhan's complexion was unexpectedly calm as he smiled and said, I have one last request. Please bury the two of us together. On the tombstone, write Tomb of Yi Guhan and Morong Xiu. She is not the empress, she has never been. Please grant my wish. June Moxie sighed deeply and said, I can promise you. But the person who killed her is here. Don't you want to avenge her with your own hands? And the mastermind who killed her is in the palace. Don't you want to avenge her with your own hands? Raimo is here. Don't you want to take care of her?
Can you really rest assured? I trust you. With you taking care of Raimo, I will be at ease. Yi Guhan smiled with expectation and yearning. Looking at the dark night, the cold wind blew his long hair messily. He slowly said, the murderer. I will leave it to you. The road to the underworld is lonely. If I kill him now, Xiu will still be afraid when she sees him in the underworld. So, I will leave first to accompany her. As for Yang Huayu, he is not worthy for me to kill. He smiled slightly and said, Xiu is waiting for me. What is more important than our reunion in the world? Revenge is not worth it. If we miss our reunion in the next life, Xiu will be disappointed and sad. We have been separated for a lifetime. As he said this, he slowly leaned over and pressed his face against Morong Xiu's still warm face. He whispered affectionately, Xiu, don't hurt, with me, you won't be lonely. His body suddenly trembled violently. Then, he softly fell forward. His remaining hand tightly hugged Morong Xiu's body. Their cheeks were tightly pressed against each other, and there was no more sound. Yi Guhan used the remaining dark force to break his own heart meridian and his breathing was cut off. The two hugged each other tightly. On their faces, there was the same expression: satisfaction, expectation, yearning, longing. It seemed that they had reunited in the underworld. It seemed that in the next life, they had made a promise. Mother, Uncle Yi Ah. Princess Ling Meng let out a heart-tearing and lung-splitting cry. She suddenly opened her cherry lips and a mouthful of bright red blood spurted out from the corner of her mouth. Her eyes closed and she fell unconscious. The pain in his body had reached its limit. His mother, who had doted on him the most, had passed away, and Uncle Yi, whom he had relied on the most, had also followed him to the ground a moment later. Two of her closest people had passed away one after another. Princess Raimu, who had been traumatized, could not bear such a series of violent blows. She finally fainted. 2 hours ago, he was still huddled together with his mother under the same lamp, talking about his own worries. Only 2 hours had passed, yet they were already separated forever. How could a delicate woman like her endure such a cruel fact? Jun Moxie sadly lowered his head. Since he saved Yi Guhan, he had been depressed. After knowing Yi Guhan for so long, he had never seen Yi Guhan smile. Today was the only time he smiled, but it was for the illusory afterlife. Looking at Yi Guhan and Murong Xiao snuggling up to each other, Jun Moxie's heart was suddenly filled with emotions. From his mother Dongfang Wenxin and his father's love, to witnessing Yi Guhan and Murong Xiao's undying love, he suddenly had a deep realization: what exactly is love? Suddenly, a song came to his mind, faintly echoing. Perhaps it was a marriage in his previous life.
Perhaps it was fate in the next life. The fault lies in our meeting in this life. It would only add to the fruitless grudge. When the affairs of the world pass away, when the sea turns into mulberry fields, once again, I will repay this love. If he were to repay this love, perhaps it was a marriage in his previous life. Perhaps it was fate in the next life. The fault lies in our entanglement in this life. Giving birth to more suffering without an end. When the affairs of the world pass away, when the sea turns into mulberry fields, once again, I will repay this love. Then, I will repay this love. The poignant song and the helpless emotion seemed to flow quietly between heaven and earth. Chapter 645. Jun Moxie sighed softly, picked up the bodies of Yi Guhan and Murong Xiao, and gently put them aside. His movements were so careful and cautious, as if he was afraid to disturb the reunion of the two people in the underworld. After settling the bodies of the two people, he turned back to check on Princess Raimu's injuries. He was surprised to find that Princess Raimu's injuries were also so serious. The double blow of losing her loved ones and the pain of her illness caused the delicate girl to faint. Both of her knees were broken, which showed how much strength she had used to kneel down one after another without any regard for her life. In addition to the huge impact that came afterwards, his knees, which were already heavily injured, suffered another heavy injury. The skin on his knees was lacerated, and his bones were exposed. Even his veins were bulging, suffused with a terrifying blood-red and purplish-green color. There was another big bloody hole on his head, and the blood that flowed out had already congealed at this moment, and was frozen together with the ground. However, the center of the wound was still continuously foaming with blood. This kind of injury was so serious. From a normal point of view, it was an incurable disease. Even if it could be cured, it would be a disability. Fortunately, Jun Moxie was here. Fortunately, Jun Moxie's power had improved greatly recently. Otherwise, he would really be helpless, and it would be difficult to fulfill his wish. Jun Moxie did not dare to be negligent. He reached out with his left hand and grabbed Princess Raimu's small hand. An extremely pure spiritual power poured into her body, slowly restoring her physical strength. At this moment, consolidating her corporeity was the key. Once Raimu lost a lot of blood, her life would be in danger. At that time, if he wanted to treat her again, it would take a lot of effort. His right hand was also idle. With a sweep in the air, Princess Rima's long hair, which was stuck to the ground by blood, was all cut off. Then, he carried her by the waist. Jun Wui had also arrived at the scene at this time. In fact, Third Master had already been there for a while. He watched as Yi Guhan, his childhood playmate, committed suicide for love in front of his eyes, but he didn't say a word to stop him. 20 years ago, Jun Wui was one of the few people who witnessed Yi Guhan and Murong Xiu falling in love. He witnessed their vows of undying love and their deep love. He also witnessed their separation, their helplessness, and their pain. Finally, he witnessed the two dying together for their love and reuniting after death. Jun Wui had expected his good friend to seek death, but he did not say anything because he knew that it was meaningless. Now that Murong Xiu was dead, Yi Guhan had lost his life. How could he continue living? Or it could be said that Yi Guhan's heart had already died 18 years ago. However, Murong Xiu was still alive. Yi Guhan didn't want Murong Xiu to be lonely, so he insisted on living and accompanying her. Now that Murong Xiu was dead, Yi Guhan finally had nothing to worry about. Death was his release. Real release. Only death could allow this affection of theirs to continue, and it would continue to exist between the heavens and the earth for eternity. In Yi Guhan's life, except for the little sweetness he experienced in his youth, he had never enjoyed any joy. Such a heavy and oppressive life, now that his lover had passed away, he was finally free. So when he saw Yi Guhan commit suicide for love, although Jun Wui was sad and bitter, he didn't try to stop him. He even felt a sense of relief for Yi Guhan. This was a kind of relaxation that moved the heavens and the earth and made the people of the world cry at the same time. Yi Guhan, from now on, you're no longer lonely in the cold night, because you have her, you can have her forever. Forever and ever, in heaven and earth. Guards. Jun Wui's voice was choked with sobs. His murderous eyes were filled with tears. Take good care of Brother Yi and Miss Murong's bodies. Order people to make a large coffin of good quality overnight and bury them together. Jun Moxie walked forward indifferently, holding Princess Rima's body in his arms. He was thinking about how to arrange this poor woman in his arms. It was better for her to be unconscious now, but how would she face such a cruel reality when she woke up? Jun Wui followed him silently and asked in a low voice, "Mo Xia, what do you plan to do next?" "Naturally, it will be done in accordance with Yi Guhan's request before he died," Jun Mo Xia replied in a callous manner. "I will give both of them a satisfactory burial place." His eyes emitted a sharp cold light. "I mean, what about the murderer?" Jun Wui's eyes flashed with murderous intent. "Tomorrow, set up a high platform in front of the palace and order the whole city of Tianxiang to gather and watch. Take the rebellious assassin, Wen Songyu, to the high platform. Tie him up with a fishing net and put him to death by 1,000 cuts. 9 days and 9 nights, a total of 999 cuts. If there is one less hour, or one less cut, I will consider the executioner as his accomplice, and bring disaster to the whole family. Isn't it not too much to sentence him to death by capital punishment for assassinating the empress of a country?" Jun Moxie said calmly, but his tone revealed an inexplicable hatred. The love between Yi Guhan and Murong Xiu touched his indifferent heart. At this moment, he made such a crazy decision. He must fulfill the love between Yi Guhan and Murong Xiu. Jun Mo Xia wanted to use a funeral that would shock the entire world to comfort the souls of the two in heaven. Even if it was shocking, world-shattering, or even long-lasting, he would not hesitate. "I don't care about the general trend of the world or the common people. But as long as it is worth it, I will do it." The evil prince only acts according to his heart. He doesn't care about worldly etiquette. "Yi Guhan, Murong Xiu, I will fulfill your love. I will avenge you. I will make up for your regrets. I will fulfill your unfulfilled wishes." I never had a good impression of Yi Guhan, and I barely understood Murong Xiu. But what moved me was the affection between the two of you. Jun Wui gasped, "In front of the palace?" Tens of thousands of people watching. Entanglement in fishing nets. Death by 1,000 cuts. Such a crazy decision had left Jun Woo-yi, the Blood General, shocked to the point of shock. Yes. I'm already being lenient by not investigating the sect of the assassin. Jun Moxie raised his face. His face was angular and resolute. It's decided. Okay. But what about the mastermind? Jun Woo-yi sighed. He knew it was useless to persuade him. After thinking for a long time, he finally asked this question carefully. Morong Shou didn't say who really wanted her dead, but she didn't need to say it. In Tianxiang City, who could order Wen Sangyu around? There was only one answer. There was only one person. Him. He can't die. At least not now, even if he wants to die. Jun Moxie smiled slightly and said viciously, even if we don't count the debt between Yi Gohan and Morong Shou, there's still the hatred of our Jun family, the hatred of my father and second uncle, and the blood debt of my 2 brothers. If we let him die like this, it's too easy. Even if it's death by 1,000 cuts, 9,999 cuts, it's still too easy for him. I must let him live a life worse than death. Jun Woo-yi sighed deeply. That night, after settling down Princess Raimu, Jun Moxie did not hesitate at all and immediately mobilized the troops. Jun Moxie, Jun Woo-yi, Jun Zhantian, Solitary Eagle, Feng Wanyun, Haichen Feng, Song Shang, Bailey Luoyun, Ling Ao, the 300 Heaven Destroyers and Soul Devourers, and even Guan Qinghan and Dongfang when Exayan followed them and quietly left the Jun residence. Blood Sword Hall. Jun Woo Hui's death was directly related to the 3 battalions of the Imperial Guards. It could be said that they were the enemies of the Jun family just like the Shao family. How could Dongfang when Exayan not be there to besiege the Blood Sword Hall? The hatred of killing her husband was absolutely irreconcilable. Dongfang when Exayan must see the enemies who killed her husband with her own eyes. No matter how bloody and cruel it was, she must see it. She must take revenge for her husband at all costs. This was the insistence of Dongfang when Exayan. The Jun family must be present for the great hatred of the Jun family. The souls of the heroes were not far away, and they could be comforted in the underworld.
The first half of the night was still filled with the joy of the new year, but the second half of the night was the beginning of endless bloodshed, and it was also the first battle of the Jun family to collect the blood debt. Jun Moxie would not allow any fish to escape the net. Therefore, Jun Moxie gathered all the most elite forces of the Jun family. On the long street, the blood fog had yet to disperse, and the 3 battalions of the Imperial Guards had already appeared in Jun Moxie's vision. Looking at the heavily guarded battalions that were close to the palace, Jun Moxie smiled coldly. The next moment, Jun Moxie, Solitary Eagle, Feng Wanyun, Haichen Feng, Jun Woo-yi, Bailey Luoyun, Ling Ao, Song Shang, and the rest all moved out together. Everyone silently dispersed into the night sky, almost without making any sound. The guards outside the 3 battalions were all silently dealt with in an instant. With the full strength of several Superior Supreme, and the weakest being Shenxian's strength, these ordinary soldiers did not have any room to maneuver at all. Jun Zhantian, on the other hand, was waiting at the same spot with a large group of people. The old man's eyes flashed with the joy of revenge and infinite sadness. After that earth-shattering incident, the old man's mentality had instantly changed sharply. Since the Blood Sword Hall had changed and collectively became the Imperial Guards, then everything was self-evident, and there was no need for any evidence. The Tianxiang Imperial family had no loyalty to the Jun family, so why should I still be loyal? This was a great absurdity. The fact that the Blood Sword Hall had changed into the Imperial Guards was a huge blow to the old man. Dongfang when Exayan and Guan Qinghan, dressed in white, quietly looked at the dark tent in front of them, their eyes also full of coldness. Jun Moxie's white robe flashed in the dark night, and with a wave of his hand, the 300 members of the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer members were like a group of extremely agile leopards, silently scuttling out in the dark night. First, a few people occupied the original guard positions, and then 3 people formed a team, guarding the various entrances. The rest of the people swarmed in like a swarm of bees. Today's 2 shifts, tomorrow's 2 shifts, the matters at home will be settled. The day after tomorrow, the outbreak will begin. Today was a huge mistake. I woke up in the morning to write, and after typing 1,000 words, the computer suddenly broke down, and the document could not be typed, and could not be copied.
Rebooting the machine was the same, so I hurriedly called a taxi, and took the main unit to repair, but when I went to the computer repair shop, everything was normal, so I moved back, but when I got home, it was still the same, so I called the guy who repaired the computer and scolded him, then called a taxi, and when I got there, everything was still normal, so when I came back, it was still the same. I broke down. The guy who repaired the computer said, "Do you want me to go to your house to take a look?" So he came. After fiddling for a long time, he frowned and said, "Did a hacker hack you?" "I don't have a choice, you should find someone else." After he left, I continued to research, and made a few phone calls to get the guys to come quickly. After the phone calls, I suddenly realized, why did the control key on the keyboard sink down and not pop up? So I used my fingernails to pick at it, and it popped up. Everything returned to normal in an instant. Pfft. So that's what happened. I spent nearly 100 yuan just to call a taxi.
Chapter 646. The solitary falcon neatly dealt with the members of the Blood Sword Hall in one of the tents. He had just come out, and was about to rush into the second tent when he saw Jun Amo-Sia rushing out of the tent with his hands covered in blood. He had left a blood-red rainbow in the dark night. A fierce fight came from a tent not far away. At the same time, a voice roared, "Who are you? Do you know where this place is? How dare you be so presumptuous? Aren't you afraid of bringing disaster to your family?" Then came Jun Wui's cold voice, "What? You don't recognize me, Jun Wui? But I recognize you. Even if you turn into ashes, I won't mistake you for someone else." "Ah. Jun Wui. You. A cry of surprise was heard. Jun Moxie's body made a strange turn in the air and slid in like a fish. He saw Jun Wui fighting with a red-faced man in a nightgown. There were 2 other people who were bareback and helping them. There were 3 other people who were already dead on the ground. Jun Wui's cultivation was already close to the supreme level. This red-faced man only had the cultivation of Tian Xian at the peak. Under Jun Wui's fierce offensive, he retreated step by step. Jun Moxie felt something was wrong as soon as he came in. Because Jun Wui, who had always been calm and collected, had a face full of resentment at this moment. He had lost his cool. Otherwise, with Jun Wui's current strength, he could have taken down his opponent long ago. Jun Moxie thought of something. He flew and dropped his hands. With a flick of his index finger, a sword and a saber flew out from the left and right. They were already stuck in the 2 people's necks. With a bang, the 2 people fainted at the same time. Looking at the red-faced man and the resentment on Jun Wui's face, Jun Moxie seemed to understand something. He asked, "Third uncle, this guy was one of the people who entered your army back then, right?" Jun Wui sent out 2 palm strikes and said through gritted teeth, "Not bad. Back then, it was this fellow who held the military order and led the Shao clan into the main camp, causing the 100,000-strong army to be useless. This person was the culprit. I will never forget his face." Jun Moxie smiled coldly and said, "Since that's the case, don't let him die a quick death." Jun Wui sneered, "Of course I won't let him die so easily." The red-faced man's face was filled with despair as he roared loudly like a madman. He wholeheartedly fought with his life on the line, hoping that he would be lucky enough to perish together with his opponent. However, with the arrival of Jun Moxie, Jun Wui no longer had to worry about the red-faced man escaping. He could use his own strength. The red-faced man's skills were inferior to his opponent's, and he was instantly restrained. He could not even barely defend himself. Jun Wui sneered cruelly. Suddenly, he gritted his teeth and charged forward.
With a bang, the two of them collided. The red-faced man roared and spat out a mouthful of blood. Both his wrists were dislocated at the same time with a crack, and he lost all his combat power. However, Jun Wui wasn't willing to let him off. So, he spun around and kicked him in the chest. Then, he kicked him to the ground. Then, he stepped heavily on his throat. The red-faced man screamed miserably. His legs kicked and he fainted. Jun Imo-sia shouted, and two big men broke through the tent. They held ropes made of beef tendons in their hands, and tied the three men up in a practiced manner. They were like rice dumplings. We need to interrogate them later. Jun Wui snorted and said angrily, there must be a conspiracy. Third uncle, what else do we need to interrogate? Conspiracy? What conspiracy? Jun Imo-sia laughed mischievously. Then, he said in a deep and ruthless voice, what is this place? How did these people come here? Why did the Blood Sword Hall become the royal guards? It's already clear. What else do we need to interrogate? Since Grandpa has acquiesced and even participated in our action, it means that he has abandoned his loyalty and agreed with our way of doing things. These people should be directly executed together with Wen Sangyu. Jun Wui's eyes lit up and he said ruthlessly, that's right. At this moment, there were shouts of killing outside, and flames were soaring into the sky. The neighboring military camps blew their horns one after another. They gathered noisily and prepared to come to the rescue. When Jun Moxie and his nephew stepped out of the tent, the battle here was already coming to an end. 100 members of the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer team were waiting with Shen Beast tendon crossbows in their hands. Once someone escaped, they would immediately become a hedgehog. Solitary Eagle, Feng Wanyun, and the other top experts stayed in front of the tent in the center, watching with their hands behind their back. Hai Chen-feng, Bailey Luo-yun, and the rest were still fighting inside. It was obvious that this was the place where the leaders of the Blood Sword Hall were. The tent was especially large and gorgeous. How's the situation? Jun Moxie walked over and asked. It's basically settled. This is the only place left. Let Hai Chen-feng and the rest train a little. Their progress is undoubtedly fast, but their state of mind may not be able to keep up. Solitary Eagle's eyes sparkled as he watched the fierce battle inside. He said, this kind of frightening but not dangerous opportunity is rare. Jun Moxie nodded his head in agreement. With Solitary Eagle and Feng Wanyun, two superior spirit masters, watching over the formation, it was guaranteed that nothing would go wrong. Under such circumstances, it was undoubtedly a good thing to let these brats train with real swords and spears and gain some combat experience. The people inside aren't weak. One of the leaders couldn't help but ask when he saw that the three of them were so calm and did not seem to care about his army at all. The Jun family is here to settle the matter. Unrelated people, please leave. Those who dare to disturb will be killed without mercy. One of the burly men stepped forward and replied with Lengleng. This was already the border of the palace, but in the words of this Heaven Destroyer member, the royal army was actually unrelated people. Killed without mercy. The Jun family? The commander shuddered as he looked at the source of the firelight in bewilderment. Suddenly, a whistling sound cut through the air, and a white silhouette slowly rose from the flames. It stepped onto the top of the flagpole outside the tent, and a tall and slender silhouette stood there, as steady as a mountain, and loudly announced, Jun Moxie of the Jun family is here to exterminate the rebels. Unrelated people, get out of the way. The last 5 words he shouted were like rolling thunder that resounded through the entire Tianxiang city. That kind of reckless and arrogant attitude was not concealed at all. The troops coming from all directions suddenly stopped. Almost at the same time, all of them reined in their horses. For a moment, the sound of horses neighing could be heard. Then, a steady voice said, "So it's Jun Sunshao here, this old man has been disrespectful. May I ask, what is the third young master doing here?" The one who spoke was the commander of the imperial bodyguards, Morong Hao of the Morong family. Jun Moxie snorted and said in a deep voice, "Do I have to report to you when I'm doing something? If you don't leave, then you'll have to stay as well." Morong Hao's expression changed. He was about to speak, but suddenly, an old man in black clothes appeared in front of his horse like a ghost. He looked at him with eagle-like eyes and spat out a single word from Lengleng's mouth, "Get out." As he spoke, he drew a line with the tip of his foot and his figure flashed. In an instant, he drew a 3 feet deep trench on the ground. He stood where he was and coldly said, "Anyone who dares to cross this line will die." Morong Hao took a deep breath. This was the edge of the imperial palace, and the ground was paved with the best quality granite. The texture was unique, but this old man in black had casually created such a trench with the tip of his foot. Furthermore, there was absolutely no Xian Qi emitting from his body. Could it be? He carefully looked at the old man. His black clothes were like iron, his face was thin, and his eyes were like an eagle's. Suddenly, he remembered a legendary figure. According to the rumors, wasn't this king of man in the Jun family? Could it be that this was the king of man, the grassland eagle god, solitary eagle? He could not help but tremble. At this moment, Jun Zhantian's deep voice was heard, "Morong Hao, lead your men and retreat." Chapter 647. In the imperial palace, the wine glass in the emperor's hand fell to the ground with a "pah" sound. His whole body suddenly trembled like a sieve. After a long while, he calmed down. A sinister look flashed between his eyebrows as he muttered, "Jun Imo Xia, you've finally found the blood sword hall. Are you finally coming? I'm not afraid of you. I'm not afraid of you. I'm the emperor. I'm the emperor, the number one person in Tianxiang." He roared, grabbed the wine pot, and gulped down another mouthful. Suddenly, he stopped and muttered, "The empress should know about the blood sword hall. Does that mean she's not dead? Did she tell Jun Moxie?" At this point, his eyes suddenly lit up. He kicked over the table in a frenzy and roared, "Why aren't you dead? Morong Xiao, why aren't you dead? Why aren't you dead?" He roared like this for a while, then suddenly shrank his entire body back into the wide dragon throne. His fingers trembled as he held his head. Suddenly, he said in a low voice as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders, "Thank goodness you didn't die, that's great. Xiao. Do you know, I can't bear to let you die. I really can't bear to let you die. You're not dead, that's great." This kind of extremely complicated and abnormal feeling was not something that others could understand. Perhaps even the emperor of Tianxiang, who was in pain, could not understand his own state of mind. What exactly was he longing for? The hustle and bustle of the New Year's Eve finally passed. The emperor waited anxiously, but no one came to settle the score with him. The sky was already bright, but still no one came. Why didn't the Jun family come to find me? Since you found the blood sword hall, why didn't you come to find me? Why? This question puzzled His Majesty, and it worried him deeply. He was already prepared to face death and was ready to meet his final destination, but the other party did not come. This strange feeling was really hard to describe. "Your Majesty." A guard came to report, but it startled the emperor, who was lost in thought. He trembled and jumped up from his chair. He said angrily, "What's the matter? What happened?" As the words left his mouth, he realized that his back was drenched in cold sweat. It turned out that he could still be afraid. The Jun family has erected a platform at the entrance of the imperial palace. There's a banner on it that says, "Punish the rebels, warn the evil and eradicate the traitors." But I don't know what they're doing. The guard was startled, and hastily reported. What? The emperor was startled. His face suddenly became gloomy as he roared in a low voice, "The Jun family. This is too much. That high platform is really high. From the high platform in the palace, you can see it clearly. The guard carefully knelt down and reminded him in a low voice. I'll go take a look. The bustling construction scene completely blocked the main entrance of the palace. Jun Imo Xia was dressed in a white robe with a light blue belt around his waist. He was sitting cross-legged on a huge armchair. His black hair was fluttering freely in the cold wind. He had an evil smile on his face. He was talking and laughing with Dugu Xiaoyi beside him as if there was no one else present. Not far away, there were 3 corpses, fresh blood still dripping down. These were the guards at the entrance of the palace. They came to stop the construction when the platform was first erected, but were immediately ordered to be killed by Jun Moxie. Then, the Jun family's guards stood on the left and right. The members of the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer team surrounded the palace guards with a terrifying murderous aura. The Emperor stepped onto a high platform and looked up. The opposite platform was right in front of him. It was so eye-catching. He understood that the reason why Jun Moxie wanted to erect a high platform in front of the palace was to humiliate him. To attack him with all his might. But now, he could do nothing in the face of such humiliation. He had to bear it even if he didn't want to. If he were to really fly into a rage and launch an attack, the only result would be to hasten the destruction of the Tianxiang Empire. The Jun family was no longer the Jun family of the past. Any random person would be able to kill like a madman in the dark of the night. They would be able to come and go as they pleased, and as for killing, they would be able to take the head of the emperor without a sound. Looking at the high platform that was almost within reach, the emperor's body turned cold. His chest was filled with anger, but there was nothing he could do. For the first time, he felt some regret. If Jun Moxie wanted to take revenge openly, perhaps he wouldn't be so afraid. Even if it was torture, it would only result in death. As an ambitious person, he was not afraid of death. But this kind of blunt knife-cutting flesh, this kind of naked humiliation in front of the whole world, was unbearable to him. Right now, the emperor felt like he was the biggest laughingstock nailed to the pillar of shame. He was being ridiculed by the whole world. He looked at the white figure sitting leisurely on a wooden armchair. His eyes were spitting flames of anger. If this angry look could really burn someone to death, then Jun Dashao would have died at least 100 times. At this moment, Jun Moxie seemed to turn his head indifferently. His eyes met the gaze of the Emperor of Tianxiang, Yang Huaiyu. The Emperor felt a stinging pain in his eyes. Jun Moxie's gaze was like 2 sharp swords, accurately stabbing into his heart. In that instant, it was difficult for him to breathe. Even standing was difficult. The corners of Jun Imo Xia's mouth curled into a playful smile as he suddenly said, "Xiao Yi, look over there. It's our emperor." "Ha, that yellow robe of his really makes him look like a black bear." As he said that, he pointed with his finger. It was the middle finger. Dugu Xiaoyi also looked over and said, "Not at all, not at all. Where is the black bear?" "Oh, isn't that it? A big black bear." Jun Imo Xia pointed with his finger again. Dugu Xiaoyi wasn't the only one who was looking at him. Everyone around them also turned their gazes to look at him. Ha ha ha. Jun Moxie laughed loudly. He suddenly stretched out his left hand and pulled Dugu Xiaoyi's slender waist into his embrace. He said in a low voice, "Do you see that?" Dugu Xiaoyi felt weak all over as she was suddenly embraced by him. She leaned against him weakly and said shyly, You're so bold. There are so many people here." Although she said that, the little girl did not struggle. She did not even have the slightest intention of resisting. She could not wait to let the whole world see her happiness. "This is the first time this enemy has hugged me." Dugu Xiaoyi blushed and thought to herself. Ha ha ha. Awesome. Holding the power of life and death in my hands, holding a beauty's waist with a smile. Ruling the world. Sweeping across the universe, shocking the world with a flip of my hand. Gods and ghosts cry with a glance. What more can I ask for in life? Ha ha ha. Jun Mo Xia laughed maniacally, his voice reverberating in all directions. That laughter was like a sharp steel needle, piercing into His Majesty's ears, piercing into his heart. What nobility, what glory, splendor, and wealth! How can they be in my eyes, Jun Moxi's eyes? Jun Moxi laughed. His left sleeve rolled up like a flowing cloud. A glass of wine beside him jumped up. He caught it in his hand and suddenly brought it forward. He laughed from afar and said, "Your Majesty, it's rare that you have the leisure to climb up high to look at me. Let me give you a toast from afar." Ha ha ha. Young Master Jun's voice was wild and unrestrained, carrying with it an unyielding arrogance that didn't conform to the heavens and earth, spreading far and wide. Everyone was startled. They looked in the direction of his voice and saw a bright yellow figure disappearing behind the curtains. Jun Moxi's wild laughter didn't stop. He drained the wine in his cup in one gulp. With a flick of his wrist, the wine cup flew out like a shooting star. With a "pa" sound, it smashed into pieces at the window where His Majesty had just appeared. It was a great humiliation. In the imperial palace, His Majesty's face was ashen. He flicked his sleeves and went downstairs. His whole body was trembling with anger. His eyes were bloodshot. Madness, despair, and humiliation alternated in his eyes. He panted heavily. His breathing became more and more hurried. Suddenly, he choked and coughed violently. Blood trickled down from the corner of his mouth. Jun Moxi had caused such a ruckus. If the imperial family couldn't get rid of Jun Moxi in the shortest time possible, then his dignity as the Emperor of Tianxiang would be gone. But, how could he get rid of Jun Moxi? Just think about it, who in the world is capable of accomplishing that? Why did Mr. Wen withdraw? Why did the Great Golden City make such a decision? The Emperor couldn't think of any other reason if he didn't have misgivings about Jun Moxi and the Jun family. Even the three Holy Lands couldn't do anything about Jun Moxi. So, what could a mere emperor of this world do? But, he couldn't vent his anger. His chest was about to explode. The bystanders didn't know the truth. So, they couldn't help but be stunned when they saw this scene. This Master Jun Sunshao is so lawless. Isn't this no different from rebellion? Not only did he build a high platform in front of the imperial palace, but he also humiliated His Majesty. Isn't this too unimaginable? There was a lot of noise and footsteps. All the aristocratic families in the capital had arrived. But, seeing this scene, even an idiot could understand that the Jun family was clearly going against the royal family. After showing their heads from afar, they disappeared without a trace. This muddy water is too deep. Let's stay away from it. It was the first day of the Lunar New Year. The weather was great. The sun gradually rose, and under this clear sky, this cruel show of a death by 1,000 cuts finally began. As the naked and tied people were taken to the high platform and tied to the wooden stakes, the voices of the bystanders became louder and louder. One by one, they were taken to the high platform. A total of 118 people were taken to the high platform. Wen Songyu was the last one. Jun Zhantian and Jun Wui, together with the Jun family, finally made their appearance. Everyone's face was filled with excitement and joy. The great hatred that had been buried for 10 years was finally going to be avenged today. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Jun Moxi floated up to the high platform and waved his hand. Suddenly, a big flag appeared on the high platform. It was blood red and over 100 feet high. There were 7 big words written on it, General in white, Jun Wuhui. The 7 big golden words shone brightly under the sun, as if they were emitting thousands of rays of light. It was like the glory of the name itself, illuminating the world. The crowd below seemed to realize something and couldn't help but be in an uproar. The flag of the General in white had not been seen for 10 years. Why did it suddenly appear here at this time? Jun Mo Xie's expression was solemn as he bowed towards the flag. The Jun family members in the audience also bowed in salute. Jun Zhantian's eyes were filled with tears as he gazed at his son's flag for a long time. His lips trembled as his white hair danced in the wind. He stared at it in a daze, as if he could never get enough of it. They gritted their teeth so hard that they could hear their teeth chattering. It was only now that they found out that their beloved General June had been murdered. Begin the execution. June Moxie's eyes turned cold, and he waved his right hand. A black net was thrown out, and everyone on the stage was covered with it. Then, it tightened and slowly twisted. Little by little, the prisoners' muscles bulged out of the small holes in the net. Even those who had no common sense or knowledge knew what kind of punishment was being carried out on the stage: death by 1,000 cuts. It was the cruelest and most inhumane way to execute a prisoner. Everyone's breathing became rapid. The executioners stretched out their hands and pulled out the cloth that was stuffed in the mouths of the prisoners. These people's dantians had all been crippled by June Mo Xia. Their xian qi that they had painstakingly cultivated for many years was long gone. But unexpectedly, not a single one of the 100 or so people begged for mercy. Although some of them were so scared that their faces were pale and their bodies were trembling, but no one begged for mercy. These people were assassins, and were used to seeing life and death. Seeing this scene today, they knew that begging for mercy was useless. They would be stabbed if they stretched out their heads, and they would be stabbed if they shrank their heads. So, they might as well endure it. Kill. The people below the stage were shouting wildly. June Mo Xia raised his right hand, and fiercely made a chopping gesture. 118 steel knives were raised at the same time. Wait! June Moxie, I have something to say. Wen Songyu suddenly raised his head. The strong humiliation of being naked made this Supreme Master's face distorted. June Moxie, I have always followed the rules in my life. I have never done anything harmful to others. This is the only mistake I have made in my life. And I was entrusted by someone. Can't you just give me a quick death? Even if you've been a saint your entire life, you've committed a crime on the last matter. So you're still a sinner. June Mo Xia looked at him coldly. This has nothing to do with good or evil. No matter what, I am a Supreme Master of the Supreme Golden City. I don't want you to be merciful. Can't I ask for a decent death? June Moxie, why do you have to be so cruel? Don't leave a way out for us in the future. Wen Songyu was so angry that he asked sadly. You finally took out your life-saving talisman? You are going to use the Supreme Golden City to scare me. You should know that the Supreme Golden City can't scare me. June Moxie smiled coldly. He flicked his finger, and a black light flew out and smashed into Wen Songyu's mouth. Chapter 648. June Moxie smiled faintly, revealing his snow-white teeth. In the eyes of these people, it was so cruel. Like a beast baring its fangs before it hunts its prey. Upon hearing this, several people showed a look of despair on their faces at the same time. They were thinking about this in their hearts. They were prepared to bite their tongues and commit suicide after a period of time. They didn't expect this young man to be so ruthless. With just one sentence, he forced them to not even commit suicide. They could only endure the pain. Since there was no chance of getting lucky today, should they still implicate their families? June Moxie had grasped the psychology of these people. They couldn't live, and they couldn't die. In the underworld, some debts had to be repaid. Naturally, they had to be repaid thoroughly. June Moxie sneered and said, yesterday's various causes, today's retribution. What are you waiting for? Execute. As soon as his voice fell, the butcher's knives fell in the hands of a group of executioners. Today's executioners seemed to be fiercer than in the past. Their work was more careful and neat. June Dashao's reputation as a bear tyrant was now well known. He slaughtered living people with a glare, and he slaughtered several people at once. Today, he slaughtered over 100 people in one go, and all of them were executed by 1,000 cuts. How could they not be careful and neat? If they accidentally let their prisoners suffer a few cuts, their entire family would have to be buried with them. Therefore, the group of executioners naturally had to be as meticulous as possible. This also caused many of the people who were being tortured to have zero crimes. As the knives fell, the flesh split open, and blood spurted. A series of earth-shattering screams rang out continuously. Below the stage, some people screamed in fear, their faces pale. Ordinary people were shocked to hear such heart-wrenching screams. Fear was a reasonable thing. However, there was another group of people, all of them standing ramrod straight, watching everything that was happening on the stage with great pleasure, afraid to miss even half a glance. This group of people were dressed in ordinary civilian clothes, but all of them were tall and had weathered faces. They gathered together spontaneously, slowly forming the largest group of onlookers, watching the fluttering flag on the stage in an orderly manner. Their eyes were filled with excitement, eagerness, and nostalgia. These people were Jun Woo-hui's former subordinates. After Jun Woo-hui's death, many who knew the inside story felt disheartened and left the army. But today, on this big day, they gathered together spontaneously, still in the same formation as when they were in the army, quietly standing below the stage. In everyone's heart, there was a joy of revenge. Death by 1,000 cuts. The scene had officially begun. On the stage, the eyes of the 108 people who were being tortured were fixed on Jun Imo-sia. They were well aware that there was no chance for them to escape. But, all of them had the same thought in their minds: remember this kid. Even if there was no chance of survival, everyone had the same thought: remember this brat. So, you must take revenge, even if you have to live for generations to come. So, Jun Moxie stood with his hands behind his back, looking at the bloody scene in front of him. He said gently, "I know that what all of you want to do now is to kill me and take revenge. Even if you don't have the chance in this life, in your next life, in your next life, in every life, you will find me for revenge. So, you must open your eyes wide and look, and remember this face of mine. If there really is a next life, you can find me for revenge. I welcome you at any time, and even reincarnate a few more times, it doesn't matter." He sneered and said, "But look at you guys, just look at how you guys screamed after being stabbed, you're not a big deal. Even if you become a ghost, you're just a coward and a good-for-nothing. Drink milk and work hard in your next life. I don't like you guys in this life, but I hope you'll be more successful in your next life. Ha ha ha." A guy raised his head ferociously, blood and sweat dripping down his face, his muscles twisted, and he shouted, "Get stabbed? You say it so easily, come up and try it. No, you guys should enjoy this super treatment. I'm not in the mood for it." Jun Moxie snorted. "Jun Moxie, if there really is a next life, I'll kill your whole family. Just wait and see." Wen Songyu raised his head in pain, and stared at the young man in front of him with endless hatred. Although Wen Songyu was over 80 years old, he had always been clean and had profound skills, so his physical fitness was excellent. Jun Moxie was afraid that he might not be able to endure the 9 days of torture because of his age, so he didn't destroy his exquisite Xian Qi, but only broke his Dantian and destroyed his foundation, so that all his Xian Qi could stay in his body and nourish his body, but there was no room for him to use it. Wen Songyu's naked body was as strong as a teenager. As a great master, he lived a comfortable life, but now he was humiliated in the eyes of the world, and he couldn't die immediately. Naturally, the resentment in his heart reached the extreme. "Wen Songyu, I'm a little scared by your words. But I'm very curious. If there is a next life, will you be a pig or a dog?" Jun Moxie said sarcastically, "If you do something wrong and have to pay the price, you should be brave enough to bear the consequences. Why do you have to gnash your teeth and talk about the next life? It will only make me laugh at you." Wen Songyu was silent, but his bloodshot eyes were still staring straight at Jun Moxie. "Brother Wen, why are you?" In the palace, the emperor trembled and suddenly felt powerless. Shou. At this moment, he suddenly understood. Why did Wen Songyu appear here and be sentenced to death without saying anything? The empress hadn't returned yet. It seemed that she had been killed by Mr. Wen. And because of this, Wen Songyu angered Jun Moxie, so he was punished by 1,000 cuts. He was dead after all. Are you, really dead? Yang Huayu slowly lowered his head, curled up his whole body, and held his shoulders tightly with his hands. He felt extremely lonely and helpless, like a wild beast with nowhere to warm itself in a cold winter night. With two rustling sounds, a few drops of tears fell on his sleeves, and then fell to the ground. In the distance, heavy footsteps came. Jun Moxie looked up and saw Tang Yuan getting off the sedan chair and coming all the way with Sun Xiaomei and a group of guards. When they approached, Tang Yuan raised his head and looked at the military flag fluttering in the air. He bowed deeply and respectfully. They hadn't seen each other for a long time, but Tang Yuan had lost a lot of weight. Compared to before he lost weight, he could be said to be very slim, very slim. Now, he was at most around 300 pounds. It seemed that he had rebounded after losing weight, but it had been stopped. Although the base number of fatties was too large, and he was still much fatter than ordinary people, he still looked more like a human now. Jun Xie felt relieved. But at the same time, a peculiar feeling welled up in his heart. He didn't let anyone inform Tang Yuan on this occasion. Although Tang Yuan would definitely know, Jun Moxie believed that Tang Yuan should be able to understand what he meant. The Tang family had always been loyal to the royal family of Tianxiang. They were even the loyal supporters of the emperor of Tianxiang, Yang Huayu. Old Master Tang Wanli and the emperor had a life-and-death friendship. Therefore, Jun Moxie didn't think that Tang Yuan would come. Once this fatty appeared here, it meant that he would be under great pressure. Just like the other aristocratic families in the capital, although they knew that something big had happened here, they still withdrew as soon as possible. They didn't even dare to watch the show. It was because of this. Perhaps the royal family didn't dare to provoke Jun Moxie or the Jun family because they couldn't do anything to them. However, they still had an absolute advantage against the other aristocratic families. Therefore, the aristocratic families chose to remain silent. They would wait for the curtain to fall and see the reaction before making a decision. Although adding flowers to embroidery was not as good as sending charcoal in the snow, the danger of the former was far less than the latter. Jun Xie was well aware of this point, and he understood it even more clearly. Therefore, he didn't think that Tang Yuan would appear. He didn't want his brother to be in a difficult position. Fatty would definitely be in a more difficult position than the aristocratic families. On one side was his family, and on the other side was his best brother. It was really a dilemma whether to come or not. But Tang Yuan still came. Not only did he come, he even brought his fiancée with him. He made a grand entrance in broad daylight. This appearance was tantamount to showing his position. The bow to the regretless army flag also showed that there was no turning back for Tang Yuan. He used his actions to show his ultimate position. He didn't even talk to Jun Moxie beforehand. This was the most valuable thing. Jun Moxie felt very gratified in his heart. He had been hanging out with this fatty ever since he crossed over to this world. At first, he treated him as an ordinary fair-weather friend. But step by step, he found that although this fatty was a villain, he had a true temperament. He slowly accepted Fatty's friendship. Fatty could be said to be Hitman Jun's only friend in both of his lives. But Jun Xie had never imagined that in such a dangerous situation where his entire family would be annihilated, it would be this cowardly and laughable fatty who had become the only one who dared to stand out and openly support him. What is a good brother? Actions always speak louder than words. Jun Moxie floated down from the platform and arrived in front of Tang Yuan. Fatty, what are you doing here? Tang Yuan smiled mischievously. His plump face revealed a wretched smile. Do you still need to ask? You and I are equally famous debauches. Since you're here, how can I not come? You know my temperament. I've always liked to watch a good show. Ha ha ha, this is the death of 1,000 cuts. I might not get to see such a big scene a second time in my life. Wouldn't it be a pity if I didn't come? Wouldn't it be a treasure? June Moxie smiled from the bottom of his heart. He patted Tang Yuan's shoulder heavily. Then, he looked at Tang Yuan's fat face in a serious manner. Then, he looked at Sun Xiaomei, and said in a heavy tone, "Good brother." June Dashao didn't say anything else. Tang Yuan's plump face was full of a silly smile. His eyes showed a trace of satisfaction and emotion. Sun Xiaomei calmly looked at everything in front of her. She didn't say anything. She just held on to Tang Yuan's hand tightly. This was because this exceptionally intelligent woman knew that even though the June family had the absolute upper hand in the current situation, she would never be able to return to the Sun and Tang families if she were to follow Tang Yuan out of the city. After all, that was their roots. Good brother. Chapter 649. Brothers. This was an exceptionally warm word. What was a brother? Going through mountains of blades together, going through seas of fire together, bearing pressure together, not necessarily sharing blessings with you, but if there were misfortunes, we would bear them together. Brothers never need to say anything, they only need to do it. The sound of a horse's hooves could be heard as a horse galloped towards them. As it approached, the rider's hair and beard were all white and his stature was tall and sturdy. It was the head of the Tang family, Tang Wanli. Old Master Tang jumped down from his horse and landed in front of Tang Yuan. His face was full of anger as he panted with rage, "You evil creature! You don't know what's important and what's not. Come back with me." Tang Yuan shrunk his head and said, "Grandpa, please wait for a moment. I will return to the aristocratic hall after I finish paying my respects to Uncle June." "You bastard, you dare to bargain with your grandpa." Old Master Tang was so angry that his beard flew up high. His face was ashen as he raised his hand. "Grandpa, I can't go back with you, at least not now." Tang Yuan was somewhat afraid of his grandpa even though he had seen many things in recent years. But he still raised his head and argued, "Grandpa, you can risk your life for His Majesty. You can disregard your family and your life. You can do anything at any time because His Majesty has shown you kindness. Moreover, you have gone through life and death together with Him. This is a friendship between men, and I understand that. But, you can do anything for His Majesty, and I can do the same for the third young master. Grandpa, you have your friendship, and we have our perseverance, and we have our perseverance." Although the volume of Tang Yuan's voice was small, his tone was getting more and more resolute. "Just like how you still insist on being loyal to the imperial family. Even after so many years, your original intention has not changed. Your grandson certainly admires your moral integrity, but do you wish for your grandson to be a despicable villain? Alas!" Old Master Tang suddenly looked at his grandson in a daze. He raised his hand, but couldn't bring it down. After a long while, the old man let out a long sigh and said dejectedly, "But you? How would you know the pros and cons of this? Just now, third young master called me a good brother." Tang Yuan's face lit up. "I have brothers, blood brothers, but I've never had a brother like this. This is the first, and perhaps the last. Ever since I was young, no one has ever treated me as a friend, and no one has ever treated me, Tang Yuan, as a brother. Third young master is the only one. Whether it was before or now, I've always recognized him as my brother." Tang Yuan said in a low voice, "I am willing to have such a brother for the rest of my life." He looked at old Master Tang and said in a low voice, "Just like how you treated your comrades who risked their lives for you." Tang Wanli stood there in a daze. He suddenly felt that this grandson in front of him was very strange. He had always thought that this grandson of his was already a waste, a glutton, a lazy person, and a good-for-nothing. Even if the former's value had increased 100 times because of the aristocratic hall, he had always thought that he was just a puppet of June Moxie. But at this moment, he felt that this grandson had really grown up. He had his own ideas, and could be called a real man. But the position he was standing in was the opposite of his own. Tang Wanli's face darkened as he heaved a long sigh. With some difficulty, he turned around and mounted his horse. He said in a low voice, you've finally grown up. You have your own choices. In short, you're on your own now, and the Tang family. He didn't finish his sentence. His expression was very complicated. He seemed to be very gratified, but at the same time, he seemed to be very distressed. It was as if he had something to say, but in the end, he couldn't say it. Finally, he only let out a long sigh and squeezed his legs. Tears streamed down Tang Yuan's face. Looking at his grandfather's back and his white hair, he bit his lips and said in his heart, I'm sorry, grandfather, but I think I'm not wrong. Brother Wanli, Jun Zhantian strode over and called out loudly as he looked at Tang Wanli's back. Tang Wanli stopped his horse but didn't turn around. He said in a deep voice, Jun Zhantian, you've avenged your son today. You've vented all your grievances and your heart is free. But you, other than in front of the palace, is there no other place for you to set up this high platform? Other than feeling free, do you not have any other thoughts? Don't you feel a little uncomfortable? Jun Zhantian stood there solemnly and slowly shook his head. Brother Tang, you are not me. There are some things that you won't understand. I know that your heart is not comfortable, but I also don't want this to happen. Black and white, right and wrong, there must be an explanation. How can these grievances be resolved? If you were me, what would you do? Yes. I don't understand. I don't think I will ever understand, but I am very uncomfortable and very angry. Tang Wanli's voice was cold as he said in a low voice, I believe that I am not the only one who feels uncomfortable. My old brothers who were lucky enough to survive that year will also feel uncomfortable. Those old brothers who died on the battlefield, if they are still alive, they will feel even more uncomfortable. Because what you are humiliating is what we fought for thousands of times. Tianxiang is ours. We exchanged our blood and flesh for it. It is the blood of countless people who died on the battlefield. Jun Zhantian, ask Zhu Zhu if he is comfortable, ask Murong Fengyun if he is comfortable, ask yourself if you are comfortable. As for the explanation, after today's battle, even though I am not as clear as you about the inside story, I still understand a lot. So, I did not bring my troops here today. Maybe someone has wronged you, but Tianxiang belongs to all of us. It was won by our countless brothers. Tang Wanli Lengling said, I only know this. I don't know anything else. I am not interested in knowing. Jun Zhantian sighed. That's right. Based on what you said, Tianxiang belongs to all of you. I do not deny this, nor do I have the right to deny it. Jun Moxie smiled and stood up, Old Master Tang, but you seem to have missed out on a few people. I believe that without these people, Tianxiang would not be Tianxiang anymore. Tianxiang does not belong to all of you. It belongs to my father Jun Wu Hui, my second uncle Jun Wu Meng, my third uncle Jun Wu Yi, my eldest brother Jun Imo Yu, my second brother Jun Imo Cho, and the tens of thousands of soldiers who died in Tianguanling. Today's scene may not be comfortable for all of you, but I believe that they will be comfortable for all of you. Jun Imo Xia chuckled and said sharply, if you really want to, I can reveal the truth to the world and let the people of the world judge who is right and wrong. Do you think that your old friends will be even more uncomfortable? They might not understand it as well as you do. Tang Wanli was speechless for a moment. Although he had become a civil servant, he was still a soldier and had experienced countless battles. How could he not understand the thinking of a soldier? As long as one had participated in the war, whether alive or dead, they would stand on the side of the Jun family. Moreover, if this matter were to be made public, then the Tianxiang imperial family would truly go down in infamy for 10,000 years. The sacrifice of a soldier must not be slandered by a villain. No matter if this villain was the emperor or a commoner, there must be an explanation for murdering such a pillar of the army. Otherwise, the world would not be convinced. Jun Moxie smiled and said, you don't have to panic, I will not do that because I disdain to do so. But my surname is Jun, and I am part of the Jun family, so I, Jun Moxie, will not care if you are comfortable or not. I only want them to be comfortable. I feel comfortable too. He said word by word, let my father, second uncle and 2 brothers feel comfortable, let the innocent 100,000 soldiers who sacrificed their lives feel comfortable. Let the souls of those wronged heroes feel comfortable. So, everyone had their own standpoints. In the face of hatred, there was no reasoning. Not to mention that you can't argue with me, even if you can really talk your way out of this and make me speechless, it would still be meaningless. The debt of that year must be repaid by someone. His hawk-like gaze was as sharp as a sword. Lengling said word by word, it doesn't matter who this person is. It doesn't matter how high his position is, what he owes must be repaid. Tang Wanli was silent for a moment. Suddenly, he whipped the horse's buttocks and the horse galloped away. Only a long sigh was left, drifting in the wind. On the high platform, the cruelest punishment was still in progress. Grandpa Jun's face was a little ugly as he looked in the direction Tang Wanli left, deep in thought. There is nothing to think about. Everyone has their own standpoint. Grandpa, we are here to collect debts, not to rebel. We did not destroy Tianxiang. Besides, I have never been interested in rebelling. Are you interested? I believe that our Jun family is already disdainful of such splendor and wealth. Jun Moxie smiled. Glory is glory, debt is debt. These are 2 different things. As for us, we do not need to consider the feelings of others. Justice is in the hearts of the people. If old Master Tang thinks that he can argue with me, he will not leave. Grandpa Jun sighed. He shook his head and said, forget it. Perhaps it will be uncomfortable, but Wu Hui, Wu Meng, Mou and Mo Cho must be avenged. He turned around and said, I will return to the mansion first. You take charge here. He paused and suddenly smiled bitterly. Ridiculous. Since ancient times, how could there be an immortal country? How could there be a ruler of 10,000 years? It was all hard work, all proud, but all turned into dust. Turned into nothingness. Why bother? He mounted his horse and left. The first day. Although it caused an uproar in Tianxiang City, there was no accident. The incessant screams shook the world and the entire palace. The imperial concubines, maids, eunuchs, and guards were all pale and trembling. They were panicking to the extreme, afraid that someone would suddenly break into the palace with a knife and a sword, but on the second day, the death by dismemberment continued, but there were many more unknown people watching. The expressions of these people varied. But it was obvious that they were all very interested in Wen Sanyu on the stage. A supreme being expert of a generation was actually suffering the punishment of death by 1,000 cuts without any resistance. This was rather surprising. Jun Moxie had been paying attention to the movements in the palace. Early the next morning, the heads of the aristocratic families and the courtiers were summoned to the palace and had yet to come out. Jun Moxie was not anxious at all. He looked on coldly. No matter what decision they made, he would accept it. Justice is in the hearts of the people. Chapter 650. From the second day onwards, Dongfang Wen Xian and the rest had all arrived. Even Dugu Xiaoyi, who had always been attached to Jun Moxie, was waiting at home. After all, such a bloody scene was not something that they could handle. Or perhaps, it was difficult for the world to be peaceful. Suddenly, a terrifying aura was emitted from the crowd. This shocking aura was mixed with surging anger. Jun Moxie instantly sensed it. He squinted his eyes and looked up. 2 rays of cold light shot out from his squinted eyes. In the crowd, 2 figures were particularly eye-catching. No matter where they went, it was as if a large ship was sailing across the surface of the water, leaving a path for them to pass. The person in front was tall and handsome. He looked to be in his 30s or 40s, but at the same time, he looked to be in his 50s or 60s. It was impossible to tell his actual age. His face was thin and his eyes were cold. He wore a crown on his head and was wearing a hemp robe. He was walking towards June Moxie step by step. As for the person behind him, June Moxie recognized him. Supreme Golden City's Three Pearls Throne, Xiao Weicheng. The position of the person in front seemed to be even higher than Xiao Weicheng's in Supreme Golden City. There was still a distance of 20 to 30 feet between them, but June Moxie could already feel an oppressive chill. Behind June Moxie, Solitary Eagle and Feng Wanyan both revealed a shocked expression. This person's strength had obviously completely exceeded their expectations. June Moxie leaned against the armchair. His expression and posture did not change at all. He looked at the two people walking towards him, but his eyes became more and more gloomy. "You are June Moxie." The person was expressionless. He looked at June Moxie as if he was looking at air and asked in an indifferent tone. Such a posture was like a god talking to a mortal. It was full of condescension and condescension. It was as if he was saying, "I'm giving you face by talking to you." "Oh? Don't you know I'm June Moxie? Then you can guess who I am." June Moxie rolled his eyes and looked at this person mockingly. "Brat, you have a sharp tongue," the man shouted in a desolate voice. A majestic aura that was as heavy as a mountain suddenly pressed down. This powerful aura only targeted June Moxie. Even the Solitary Eagle and Feng Wanyan behind him were not affected. This kind of precise grasp, the pinnacle of control, really reached the level of a breathtaking level. It was a pity that June Moxie was still lying lazily on the armchair with a faint smile on his face. He didn't unleash his aura to counterattack. Instead, he just casually leaned against the chair as if he didn't notice anything. An imposing aura attack? That really scared me to death. With the Hongjun Pagoda, this young master is least afraid of aura attacks. No matter how strong your aura is, can it be stronger than the Hongjun Pagoda? Go and embarrass yourself. That person only felt his enormous imposing aura that was as vast and majestic as a mountain pressing down heavily, yet it was as if he had been pressed into the ocean, yet it was also as if he had been pressed into the air, and there was not the slightest place for him to exert any force. His surefire suppression method was actually ineffective. This kind of feeling was extremely unbearable. With a wave of his sleeves, the imposing aura disappeared instantly. That person's cold face was still expressionless, but there was a trace of surprise in his eyes. Not bad indeed. As expected of someone that Venerable Mei has taken a liking to. You're really impressive. June Moxie slowly raised his eyelids and asked indifferently, "Who are you?" His voice and expression were even more indifferent and arrogant than the hemp-robed man's expression. If the hemp-robed man's expression was that of a god, then June Moxie's was that of the Jade Emperor, arrogant enough. "I'm Du Ju." Du Ju looked at June Moxie's eyes with his sharp eyes and said word by word, "I'm the Heartless Venerable." He didn't turn around. He raised one hand and pointed at the stage. He said indifferently, "Wen Sangyu is my man." He was waiting for June Imo Xia to reveal a shocked expression on his face. The Heartless Venerable, Du Ju. This was a legendary name that could change the world when it was announced in the past. Although he had been away from the mortal world for almost 200 years, and many people might not know the glory of this name, he believed that June Moxie must know. Because June Moxie had a mysterious master and a confidant who was also a venerable. "So you're Du Ju." June Moxie's lips twitched slightly. "No wonder King Master Xiao didn't even dare to breathe loudly behind you. The Heartless Venerable is really impressive. But I don't know why you've come here and come to me. What do you want? Tell me what you really want. Let Wen Sangyu go." Du Ju clasped his hands behind his back, his eyes cold as he spoke in a commanding tone. "Even if the people of Gold City are in the wrong, it is not up to you to punish them. They are not people you can humiliate. Let him go now. For the sake of your master, I can let bygones be bygones and let bygones be bygones. Let bygones be bygones? How magnanimous. For the sake of my master." June Moxie smiled weirdly. "Do you know who my master is? How can you let me go because of him?" It turned out that his face was actually so big. It's such an honor for a venerable like you to give him face. Du Ju's face darkened. He looked at June Moxie and didn't say anything else. At the same time, an extremely solemn and oppressive atmosphere formed in the air. It was so heavy that everyone present felt suffocated. Solitary Eagle straightened his body and took a step forward. His beard and hair fluttered behind him. Facing the heartless venerable, Solitary Eagle didn't retreat or show any fear. Instead, he stepped forward. On the other side, although Feng Huanyun did not move, his white robes fluttered despite the lack of wind. His fair hand also slowly landed on the hilt of his sword. His 5 fingers, dry and strong, firmly gripped the hilt of the sword. His eyes were as sharp as swords. A hint of disdain appeared on Du Ju's face. He just stood there silently without any movement. He didn't even raise his eyebrows. However, he was like a volcano that was about to erupt, emitting a terrifying aura that shook the heavens and earth. Such a terrifying aura was visible to the naked eye. Even ordinary people, if they paid close attention, would notice that there seemed to be a distorted space in this area. It was a mysterious and subtle feeling. Solitary Eagle and Feng Huanyun didn't move, but beads of sweat appeared on their foreheads. The two of them didn't think that this heartless venerable's cultivation had actually reached such a level. He didn't move, but he could use his own aura to mobilize the power of heaven and earth and use it to suppress them. Such a huge power was not something they could withstand. How could they fight against the heavens? This was no longer a simple aura. Instead, it was something that Du Ju had comprehended many years ago. He was able to use his own body's vital qi to form a temporary resonance with a mysterious energy between the heavens and earth. With a single thought, he could control this energy to attack. This had always been Du Ju's trump card. Facing June Moxie, he didn't need to use such an extreme method. However, Du Ju knew that he wasn't dealing with just June Moxie. Although June Moxie wasn't weak, he wasn't worthy of Du Ju's attention. This power of his was actually for one person to see, June Moxie's master. Du Ju wanted to tell this master, if I want to kill your disciple and destroy the June family, it's a piece of cake. However, I came here personally and even showed mercy to your disciple because of your existence. Regardless of whether the other party appreciated it or not, he had at least expressed his standpoint. Usually, at this point, both parties would take a step back. Du Ju would bring his disciple away, and the June family would forget about it. I've given you enough face, so you have to give me some face too, right? This was Du Ju's plan. Du Ju was very afraid of the legendary master of the June family. Although he was heartless, he wasn't stupid. The 90 masters from the 3 Holy Lands dared to try and kill Venerable Mei, let alone Du Ju. However, such a terrifying combination of forces would be completely defeated by the other party's aura. Du Ju knew that he wasn't a match for him. Therefore, although he was overbearing now, only an expert of his level would know that Du Ju was expressing goodwill. In this way, without leaving any trace, he could get things done without worrying about losing face. It was the best of both worlds. A strange look flashed across June Mo Xie's eyes. It was as if he was surprised, but also, something else. Following that, his face turned serious. He had been leaning against the chair all this while, but now, he finally moved. He raised his head slightly, revealing a look of shock and surprise as he looked at Du Ju in front of him. However, there was still a look of him gritting his teeth and holding on. Although it seemed like he was trying his best to hide it, a careful person would be able to see it at a glance. Du Ju snorted coldly and stood with his hands behind his back. He asked, "How does it feel? Does it feel good?" June Moxie seemed to be in a lot of pain. One could faintly see the blood vessels and pulse under his skin trembling slightly. It seemed like he couldn't bear the burden, but he could still hold on. He forced an indifferent expression and said in an indifferent tone, "It feels good. It really feels good. No, it feels too good. Too good." Du Ju snorted softly and smiled coldly, "Is that so?" Then I'll let you feel even better. After saying that, he once again increased the power of his aura. However, he was feeling strange in his heart. Why hasn't the master come out yet? Du Ju had a million reasons to believe that the peerless master was in Tianxiang City. He was in the Jun family's residence. Otherwise, how could the Jun family dare to deal with the people of the Great Golden City in public? What a joke! Could it be that I haven't oppressed Jun Moxie enough? This level of power isn't enough to lure him out. Is he that confident in his disciple? Jun Moxie groaned in a low voice. His head seemed to be suppressed by his aura. One could clearly see the blue veins on the back of his neck bulging. Chapter 651. Does it feel good now? Du Ju asked indifferently, with a hint of mockery. He had already used 30% of his strength, which was already quite impressive. Even a Supreme Being expert might not be able to withstand it. Although Jun Moxie's strength was not ordinary, it was only around the level of a Supreme Being. This kind of strength was believed to be enough. But the reality was just that unexpected. Of course, it feels good. If you could use a little more strength, it would feel even better. Jun Moxie gritted his teeth, sweat dripping down his face, as if it was very difficult for him to say each word. Very good. As expected, your bones are tough enough. Since you've already spoken, then this seat will naturally let you feel good to the end. Du Ju took a deep breath, and suddenly raised his strength to the 5th level. Only a small portion was used to deal with Solitary Eagle and Feng Wanyun, while the majority of his strength was placed on Jun Moxie. Jun Moxie's feet made a crack sound, but his body seemed to straighten up again, as if he was stubborn to the point of not turning back until he hit the wall, and not shedding tears until he saw the coffin. Du Ju frowned slightly, and said, "Are you still going to persist?" Du Ju did not dare to go too far. If he really killed this youth in front of him, the consequences would not be a joke. Jun Moxie lowered his head slightly, and said as if he was gritting his teeth, "Don't. Old thing. This young master has experienced this kind of situation many times. With this weak pressure of yours, you actually think you're so great? This young master has not had enough fun yet. Why? Old thing, do you have no more strength?" A strange scarlet light flashed in Du Ju's eyes, and his body that had been standing straight suddenly moved slightly. Actually, it was just his head leaning forward a little. But the pressure actually multiplied in an instant. His body was like a towering mountain towering in the clouds, unmoving. But that kind of vast pressure that connected the heavens was enough to subdue even the heroes of the world. But in reality, Du Ju was also a little depressed, and he was even in a dilemma. Although it was said to be friendly, this kid in front of him was too resistant. He had already used 60% of his strength, yet he was still able to withstand it. If he rashly added more, it would exceed the scope of his control, and unpredictable consequences might occur at any time. If it wasn't handled properly, then the consequences wouldn't be showing goodwill, but a demonstration. It was even to the extent that if he killed this kid on the spot, he would form an irreconcilable enmity and make an unparalleled enemy. But if he were to stop now, this brat's face would be full of dissatisfaction and would not appreciate his kindness at all. His old undying master also did not come out. In the eyes of outsiders, wouldn't it mean that he had lost a move? If that were to happen, he would really lose his head and face, wouldn't he, the heartless venerable, become a laughingstock in front of everyone? He could clearly feel that this kid was barely hanging on, so why couldn't he admit defeat even now? Could it be that his master often used this method to train him? Yes. That's right. Jun Moxie let out another muffled groan. But he opened his mouth and laughed bitterly, saying, "It feels so good." Continue, continue, Du Ju was furious. For hundreds of years, how many people had dared to provoke him like this? This little bastard who was still wet behind the ears was challenging his limits again and again. A green light flashed in his eyes, and his eyeballs suddenly turned into a faint silvery white color, flashing and disappearing. At the same time, the the pressure in the air was like a small hill that had just fallen down, and then another small hill smashed into that small hill. Boom! A soundless rumble sounded. The surrounding people were shocked to see that above June Moxie's head, there was a space of a few hundred feet that had suddenly turned into a pitch-black hole. A black that was darker than ink. It was daytime. Not only was the sun shining brightly, but the snow was also reflected clearly. But if one looked at the top of June Moxie's head, it was even more obvious that it was nighttime. 80% of his strength. The heartless venerable Du Ju had 80% of his strength. Even if Mei Xuan was here, she would also have to be careful when dealing with him. As June Moxie felt this pressure, he suddenly felt an indescribable sense of ecstasy. That's right, ecstasy. When Du Ju had just mobilized this heaven and earth spiritual energy pressure, June Moxie had already felt something strange. As Du Ju's pressure approached his body, June Moxie first felt a heavy pressure. Then, he felt the Hongjun Pagoda in his mind suddenly open, spinning at a high speed. But this time, it did not release a huge amount of spiritual energy like before. Instead, a large amount of spiritual energy suddenly separated from Du Ju's pressure, turning into a dense white fog, and was instantly swallowed by the Hongjun Pagoda. And this time, the spiritual energy was unusually thick and pure. Moreover, it was mixed with a slightly majestic atmosphere. June Moxie quickly understood what this atmosphere was. This was the heaven and earth chi. At the same time, June Moxie felt that after the Hongjun Pagoda refined this portion of energy, when it entered his body, his spiritual energy grew at a rate that was actually 10 times faster than before. What the hell was going on? But as for what exactly is going on, although June Moxie was not clear, he was not willing to delve into it at this time. Right now, June Imo Xia was like a dried-up pond, while Du Ju was making use of his own abilities like a no. It was like hundreds of high-powered water pumps, drawing water from other places and forcefully pouring it into June Moxie's meridians. Where else could he find such a good thing? It was truly a great feeling, a great feeling. So when June Moxie said to Du Ju that he was very happy, he was definitely speaking from the bottom of his heart. So, June Moxie would not waste such an opportunity. In fact, he was shouting in his heart, "Come again. Don't stop. The more the better. I don't mind even if you continue until the end of time, damn it, if you continue to squeeze me like this, I will soon break through the 5th level of the art of creation." So, June Moxie immediately acted as if he was about to collapse, but at the same time, he was not going to collapse. This gave Du Ju an illusion, this kid is going to collapse soon. Just a little more strength, and he will be finished, but he had already increased his strength several times, and June Moxie was still in this half-dead state. Du Ju finally became angry. So, he increased his strength step by step. This phenomenon, June Moxie did not know what was going on, and Du Ju was naturally even more confused, but in the end, it was because of one word, spiritual chi. The Hongjun Pagoda was extremely sensitive to spiritual chi. Once it encountered a place with an abundance of spiritual chi, it would open and absorb it. But in this densely populated Tianxiang city, the Hongjun Pagoda did not bother to absorb the spiritual chi here. Unless it was the pure heaven and earth chi that June Moxie absorbed during his cultivation, the Hongjun Pagoda was not interested in anything else. But this time, it was different for Du Ju. His cultivation was too high. He could actually mobilize a large amount of heaven and earth chi for his own use. He could directly compress the power of the heaven and earth, and then press it down to become his own attack. This kind of brilliant method, even if it was against a venerable expert of the same level, it would still be able to make the other party look miserable. This was similar to Mei Xuyan's world cage. How could the power of the heaven and earth be ordinary? But this kind of supreme weapon that could be used to deal with others had fallen into June Moxie's hands today, and had become his greatest tonic. Because this kind of power was simply great news for the Hongjun Pagoda. To think that there was actually such a person who had painstakingly gathered the heaven and earth chi and forcefully poured it into the Hongjun Pagoda, and it was the kind that he could not do without. So, everything was very dramatic. And what made Jun Dashao even more pleasantly surprised was that under this kind of compression, Du Ju had to first mobilize his own mental strength to communicate with the heaven and earth chi, then he could further mobilize the heaven and earth chi to attack. But what the Hongjun Pagoda lacked was the heaven and earth chi. There was no shortage of spiritual chi, but the heaven and earth chi was a vast amount of chi. With Jun Moxie's current strength, he could not absorb much, and he often needed the Hongjun Pagoda to compensate him, but now, this heartless venerable had used the supreme Xian technique that he had bitterly cultivated for hundreds of years, and put on the demeanor of a peerless expert. He stood with his hands behind his back, proudly facing the wind, and used a posture that best reflected the demeanor of an expert. His expression did not change, and in a short period of time, he had actually directly replenished a lot of the heaven and earth chi. He had almost made up for all the previous losses, and even exceeded them by a little. Such a wonderful thing was naturally unknown to Jun Moxie. But this did not affect Jun Dashao's original intention of silently making a fortune. Under Jun Dashao's superb acting, sometimes he gritted his teeth, hissed, and gasped for breath, his face ashen, and his lips pale. Sometimes his bones would crack, and his face would sweat profusely. His feet were stepping on the bluestone ground, and 2 pieces of bluestone had already broken, and the ones at the sides were also showing signs of cracking. Even Du Ju was worried for him. If he exerted a little more strength, would he crush this kid into meat paste on the spot? But he could clearly feel that if he exerted a little more strength, this kid would be convinced, and wouldn't be able to hold on anymore. One more point, one more point, one more point, one more point, just like that, the 2 of them were in a deadlock. If Du Ju knew that the strongest attack that he was so proud of had become the opponent's tonic, and that the opponent was gritting his teeth and enjoying it, as if he was enjoying a massage, this heartless venerable would definitely scream in embarrassment, and then spit out a mouthful of blood and die. And he would die with everlasting regret. For hundreds of years, when had the heartless venerable ever been played like this? It was not that he wanted to do good, but Jun Moxie's body was really too strange. Chapter 652. Du Ju was already caught between a rock and a hard place. Right now, he had already used 80% of his strength, and it had already exceeded the limits of what he could control. However, it was still possible for him to forcefully retract his strength. He was also planning to forcefully retract his strength the moment something went wrong. At most, he would just suffer some damage to his vitality. But this stubborn boy was still gritting his teeth and holding on. This made Du Ju feel that he cherished his talent. As a young boy, Jun Moxie was probably the first one in history to be able to resist to this extent. If he increased his strength again, it would really be beyond his control. It was easy to release, but difficult to withdraw. If he was not careful, he was afraid that the young boy in front of him would suffer a terrible injury that he could never recover from. Moreover, it would leave a shadow in his mind that was similar to the devil in his heart, and he would never be able to make any progress. That would really be an irreconcilable hatred. Putting himself in Du Ju's shoes, if Du Ju had such an outstanding disciple but was forcefully turned into a cripple, he would also disregard everything to take revenge. Thinking of this, Du Ju had decided to stop. Since that master still doesn't show up, I will kidnap Wen Sangyu and leave. I think he will know that I have been merciful when he comes back, so it should be no big deal. But at this moment, he heard Jun Moxie's extremely annoying words again. You really don't know what's good for you. I have been merciful from the beginning to the end. But you, a dead duck, not only are you stubborn, you even dare to mock me. Du Ju was furious, and subconsciously increased the power of the coercion directly to the peak. Everyone in the square suddenly felt their vision darken and their feet shook. Even the high platforms swayed a little. With the power of the aftermath, one could imagine the pressure that the people who took it all had to bear. An unprecedented majestic force instantly pressed down, and the Hongjun Pagoda swallowed it all. There was still more, like the continuous waves of the sea, and like the waves of the Yangtze River, each wave higher than the previous one. The Hongjun Pagoda was naturally not afraid of the incoming spiritual energy. In the most hospitable manner, it absorbed all the spiritual energy that had forcefully entered, not wasting a single bit. June Moxie felt as if his meridians were about to explode. It felt so good, so good. This continued for a moment. Suddenly, the pressure on his body lightened. Du Ju had suddenly cut off the source. Du Ju was infuriated by June Moxie to the point of exploding. But after he exploded, he suddenly regretted it. It's over. This kid was definitely finished. However, he had already mobilized the maximum amount of heaven and earth spiritual energy that he could bear. He had to vent it out, because even his body could not bear this wave of heaven and earth spiritual energy. After enduring the first wave with great difficulty, Du Ju hurriedly stopped, feeling an inexplicable sense of apprehension in his heart. However, June Mo Xie suddenly moved, and slowly raised his head. His lips still had traces of teeth marks, and the corners of his eyes were twitching. His complexion was deathly pale, and his face was ashen. It was obvious that he had died and come back to life. But, he was fine. He was fine. How could he be fine? How could this be possible? Du Ju stared at the little monster in front of him, and was almost speechless from shock. Whether June Moxie was on the verge of collapse, Du Ju could not be sure. In any case, Du Ju himself was really on the verge of collapse. A 17 or 18-year-old boy had actually withstood the full power of a middle-level venerable combined with the pressure of heaven and earth spiritual energy. Who would believe such a thing if it was told to others? It was truly sensational. Was this kid a human or a ghost? Although Du Ju's face was as indifferent as before, his heart was already in turmoil. Indeed, a great teacher produces a great disciple. But such a talent was really too dangerous. June Moxie slowly raised his head, and actually smiled. Venerable Du, why, don't you let me have fun? I haven't had enough fun yet. Venerable Du's methods are powerful enough, but unfortunately, they don't last long enough, and I can't enjoy them to my heart's content. What's wrong with giving up halfway? His tone was filled with deep disappointment and dissatisfaction. He was like a resentful woman who was about to climax but was poured down with a bucket of cold water. Very resentful, heaven and earth could be his witness. When June Dashao said this, he was 100% sincere, from the bottom of his heart. He really wanted to have fun for a while longer. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But in Du Ju's ears, it became the most vicious sarcasm. How could he get out of this situation? Du Ju's venomous snake-like eyes stared fixedly at young Master June, not blinking for a moment. Suddenly, with a muffled snort, he raised his palm without even turning his head, slamming it down heavily onto the stage. A sharp whistling sound broke through the air. The next moment, Wen Songyu, who was on the platform, felt as if his chest was smashed by a 10,000-pound sledgehammer. With a bang, he flew up with the wooden stake. His body cracked in mid-air, and then he split into countless pieces like a bomb, and fell on the high platform. Under the high platform, there was blood and flesh on the ground. No one would ever recognize that the blood and flesh on the ground were once the elegant Wen Songyu. The place where Du Ju hit was at least 300 feet away from Wen Songyu. From such a long distance, even an ordinary archer might not be able to shoot from such a distance and with such accuracy. But Du Ju just raised his hand and smashed a living person into pieces with his air-splitting palm. The heartless venerable was indeed extraordinary. Du Ju turned around and didn't look at June Moxie anymore. He closed his eyes slightly, and the people in front of him could clearly see an unprecedented crazy killing intent in the heartless venerable's eyes. However, he tried his best to restrain himself. The palm just now more or less vented some of his crazy killing intent. Tell your master that Du Ju came to visit. It's a pity that we didn't have the chance to meet. If I have time in the future, I'll come again to learn from you. I've already dealt with the people from Jin City. June Moxie, let me give you a piece of advice. It's better for young people to restrain themselves. After Du Ju finished speaking, he did not even turn his head and continued walking forward. Xiao Wei-cheng followed behind him, not saying a single word from start to end. The two of them floated out of the hall. Wherever he went, the crowd would part and make way for him involuntarily. The silhouettes of the two flashed and then disappeared. From the beginning to the end, Du Ju didn't look back because he was afraid that if he turned back, he wouldn't be able to control himself and would cripple Jun Moxie on the spot, or even kill him. Du Ju was sure that if Jun Moxie continued to develop at this speed, then the title of the world's #1 expert, which had never appeared since the beginning of time, would belong to him. It was too dangerous to keep such a person with limitless potential alive, and moreover, he was an enemy. However, when it came to killing him, even the Great Golden City couldn't bear the consequences. Not to mention the mysterious and powerful master behind Jun Moxie, just the Tian Fa forest alone was not something that the Great Golden City could bear. Perhaps, they really dared to besiege Venerable Mei. However, there was a precondition: Venerable Mei wasn't in the Tian Fa forest. If Venerable Mei stayed in the Tian Fa forest peacefully, who would dare to touch the tiger's whiskers? Not to mention the 10 great masters, even if there were 100 times more of them, who would dare to do it? No matter how many people there were, as long as they entered the Tian Fa forest, even a top expert like Du Ju couldn't guarantee that they could come out alive. If Venerable Mei really mobilized the mystical beasts to attack in a fit of rage, then, Du Ju could be sure that no matter which family from the 3 holy lands, they would be razed to the ground in a day. Du Ju was well aware of the terror of Tian Fa. If a group of wild wolves was organized, they could fight against 1,000 soldiers, let alone the hundreds of millions of mystical beasts in the Tian Fa forest. King! He could mobilize all the power of Tian Fa. Jun Moxie watched the two of them leave and almost couldn't help but pull Du Ju back. Damn, you're leaving just like that? Isn't that too irresponsible? But I haven't leveled up yet. As Du Ju stopped, the Hongjun Pagoda in Jun Moxie's mind also stopped rotating, and it slowly descended in satisfaction. The benefits of Du Ju's forceful installation were not small. The heaven and earth spiritual energy mobilized by a venerable level expert was not a small amount. At the very least, when Jun Moxie circulated his cultivation, he found it difficult to absorb the heaven and earth spiritual energy. This also proved that Du Ju, the great venerable Du, had almost exhausted all the heaven and earth spiritual energy within a radius of tens of li. How much energy was this? It was too terrifying. Especially that final full-strength compression, it was like a tsunami, forcefully squeezing all the heaven and earth spiritual energy into the Hongjun Pagoda. This gift could not be said to not be generous. If Du Ju used the heaven and earth spiritual energy to cultivate, he would only be able to use 1/10,000,000th of it at most. Mobilizing the heaven and earth spiritual energy was one thing, but directly turning it into one's own strength was another. Just like how we can use a knife to kill people, but we cannot turn the knife into a part of ourselves, this is the same logic. But facing a freak like Jun Moxie, it was a completely different matter. Not to mention that Du Ju had only mobilized the heaven and earth spiritual energy within a radius of tens of li. Even if he mobilized the entire world's heaven and earth spiritual energy, the Hongjun Pagoda would not refuse. It would still accept everything, and absolutely not a single drop would be wasted. The result of this force-feeding operation was that Jun Moxie's meridians were directly bursting to the brim. Jun Dashao, who had just broken through to the 4th level of the art of unlocking heaven's fortune, directly shot up like a rocket. It was as if a deity was supporting him, and with a whoosh, he directly reached the peak of the 4th level. A typical windfall. But such a good thing made Jun Moxie very angry. There was no way he could not be angry. Because Jun Moxie had already felt that his Heaven's Fortune 4th level had reached the level where his meridians were bursting to the brim, which meant that the next step was to break through to the 5th level. But at this critical juncture, Du Ju had stopped his attack. What the fuck, isn't he playing with me? Jun Dashao cursed in his heart, and for a moment, he was extremely disappointed. No matter what, you should let me break through before you leave. Now that I'm in the mood, you withdraw before the climax arrives. Be a good person to the end, and help the Buddha to the West. What's the matter with giving up halfway? This guy didn't even think that the heaven and earth spiritual energy that was forcibly instilled into him this time would directly give him a huge benefit. How could he not be satisfied? After all, they were enemies. Jun Moxie was furious. In such a mood, he didn't even notice the fact that when Song Yu was smashed by Du Ju's palm, all he could think of was, how can I get this old guy back and let him do it again? This young master, I like this kind of abuse so much. Of course, Jun Moxie was very disappointed. The feeling of being interrupted when he was about to break through was indeed not a good one. But, if Du Ju knew about this heartless venerable would probably force himself into a dead end in the blink of an eye, and he wouldn't live no matter what. So depressing. Chapter 653. Mayor Du, after meeting Jun Moxie today, what do you think of him? Xiao Weiqing asked cautiously as they walked. The information is wrong. Seriously distorted. Du Ju Lengleng said. His body was moving very fast, but his voice was normal. In the previous information, it was said that Jun Moxie is just a young master of an aristocratic family. By chance, he became the disciple of a great master. Relying on his master as his backing, he is insufferably arrogant. It was said that he relied on his pretty face and flowery words to gain the favor of the Venerable Mei. This is simply an additional 3 levels of scoundrel. Xiao Weiqing, after we go back this time, the intelligence department that you are in charge of must be reorganized. This is simply dereliction of duty to the extreme. This is intolerable. A cruel look appeared on Du Ju's face as he said heavily, Jun Xia, this child's talent is unparalleled in this world. With his age and cultivation speed, even if he might not be able to last forever, it is definitely unprecedented. He is definitely a super genius that will not appear even in millions of years. But the intelligence department said that such a genius is useless. To a certain extent, it misled our actions and caused us to suffer a great loss. This is simply an unforgivable mistake. He paused, and his tone revealed a deep sense of fear. An 18-year-old boy can actually withstand my full power of spiritual power and not even suffer a serious injury. Jun Moxie's strength must at least be at the level of a superior supreme, or even higher. Xiao Weiqing, an 18-year-old superior supreme, do you know what this means? In the past, when I heard of his master's vast divine power, I was still quite doubtful. I did not believe that there could be such a person in this world. Today, seeing the strength of his disciple, it is really unbelievable. With such a disciple, one can imagine the strength of his master. Previously, I still had a slight desire to win, but now that I think about it, I really overestimated myself. I have not stepped into the world for a long time, and have become a frog at the bottom of a well. Let's not talk about his master. Just based on that Jun Moxie alone, I believe that with just a little more time, he will be able to look down on his generation, and no one will be able to stand up to him. Xiao Weiqing took a deep breath. His expression was ugly, but he didn't say anything. Don't say that I'm exaggerating his abilities because I'm unable to subdue him. But do you know that ever since the Xian continent came into existence, there have been countless Xian cultivators and there have been many legendary figures? But even the most outstanding genius in history was only the profound Saint Guanmeng from 3,000 years ago. He was a peerless genius who reached the level of Xian at the age of 18. Apart from him, no one else, whether it was before or after him, had been able to surpass this age and level. But even with the peerless talent of a profound sage, advancing to the 5th layer of the Xian realm, which is the so-called supreme realm, would have to be done after the age of 20. Du Ju clenched his teeth and said, but this Jun Moxie actually reached the superior supreme level at the age of 18. That's 8 levels higher than Guanmeng. What a terrifying thing this is. If we really let Jun Moxie grow up, even with the strength of the 3 holy lands, we may not be able to be in his eyes. At that time, the entire pugilistic world will belong to June Moxie alone. Ah! It's really that serious? Xiao Weicheng's eyes widened. After today's incident, Xiao Weicheng finally realized how terrifying June Moxie was. But he didn't expect it to be so serious. Just like what Du Ju had said earlier, Xiao Weicheng really thought that Du Ju was praising his master and disciple just to save face. At least, there was a reason behind it. Serious? That's serious? There's something even more serious. You haven't even realized it yet. Du Ju said coldly, right now, the three Holy Lands and Venerable Mei have become sworn enemies. And Venerable Mei is June Moxie's woman. Don't tell me that June Moxie is a pretty boy and has a relationship with Venerable Mei. Because, with June Moxie's potential, even if his partner is Venerable Mei, he may not be qualified. If the two of them are working together, it's still possible. But if it's really my judgment, it might be that Venerable Mei has borrowed a lot of benefits from June Moxie. If Tian Fa really appeared in the human world, their strength would be considerable, but it wouldn't be that scary. Because no matter how powerful Tian Fa is, they can't be compared to human Xian cultivators. But if she has a strong ally like June Moxie, and they work together. If we don't stop them, the three Holy Lands will be annihilated in no time. No man can tolerate other forces plotting against his woman, especially June Xia, this unruly son. Based on June Moxie's cultivation progress, he has already reached the level of Superior Supreme at the age of 18. Then, it can be predicted that he will reach the level of Venerable before the age of 20. Before the age of 25, he might surpass the level of Venerable, or even higher. If we wait for him to live peacefully until the age of 30. Then, the three Holy Lands don't have to work hard anymore. They can just wait to be annihilated. In Du Ju's voice, there was an obvious fear, a great fear. It can't be that fast, right? This is too unimaginable. Xiao Weicheng was still unconvinced. The process of accumulating Xian Qi is not that easy. Even if it's just the accumulation of strength and the improvement of mental state, especially when it's above Shenxian, there has always been a saying that Shenxian is at the 12th grade, every step is like ascending to the heavens. It's not something that can be achieved in 3 to 5 years. Do you think I don't understand what you're saying? But let me ask you, is it really impossible? Du Ju snorted, Xiao Weicheng, you are now at the level of Superior Supreme. 10th grade Shenxian, how old are you this year? I have experienced 178 winters and summers. Xiao Weicheng was startled and answered. That's right, it's not even 200 winters and summers. Considering your age, your progress can be said to be quite fast. Then think about it, how long have you been practicing Xian Qi? Du Ju Lengleng said. I started practicing Xian Qi at the age of 3. I successfully broke through to the Silver Xian realm at the age of 9. At the age of 12, I rose to the Golden Xian realm. At the age of 16, I was already at the Earth Xian realm. At the age of 19, I reached the Tian Xian realm. At the age of 25, I reached the peak of Tian Xian realm. At the age of 30, I successfully broke through to the Shen Xian realm. At that time, I was the most outstanding one in the family. Xiao Weicheng revealed a look of nostalgia. At the age of 49, I broke through to the Supreme Realm. Then, I continued to accumulate, until I reached the level of Superior Supreme at the age of 90. After that, I spent close to 80 years to reach my current level. Recalling the past, Xiao Weicheng suddenly felt that the years were long and he could not help but sigh in his heart. In other words, you can already be considered a genius in the eyes of ordinary people for your current achievements at the age of 178. Is that so? When you were 18, you were only at the Earth Xian realm, right? But, you have practiced for 178 years, and you are only at the same level as the current June Moxie, and he is only 18 years old. If you are a genius, then, what is June Moxie? Is there a problem with me saying that he is a peerless genius that has never been seen before? Du Ju snorted and asked, and, on what basis do you think that with June Moxie's unprecedented advancement, why can't June Moxie reach the honorable realm before the age of 20? The current you, do you still dare to say such words? Xiao Weiqing's body trembled, and he suddenly stopped in his tracks. His mouth was agape, and he had an expression of extreme shock on his face. That's right, I wouldn't have known if I didn't compare myself to him. I only paid attention to June Moxie's arrogance and despotism, but I didn't pay attention to his demon-like talent. Back then, I was already a super genius that made my family ecstatic. My cultivation speed was also once regarded as a demon-like speed by everyone. But, compared to the current June Moxie, Xiao Weiqing suddenly felt sorrowful. Comparisons are odious. So, the gap between two people can actually be so big. Now, do you understand how scary June Moxie is? Du Ju Lengleng looked at him. Then, City Lord Du means. A ruthless look appeared in Xiao Weiqing's eyes. If that's the case, if this June Moxie continues like this, won't he become a hidden danger for our 3 holy lands? If it was possible, I would have killed him with my palm just now. There were even a few times when I wanted to make a move. But, killing him so brazenly like this, can't, absolutely can't. Du Ju said solemnly, June Moxie must die. There's no need to doubt this. We can also cause a dispute because of his death, but we can't let them know that it was us who did it. He frowned and looked into the distance, revealing a thoughtful look. Venerable Mei is one thing, but the more important thing is that master of June Moxie. Judging from June Moxie's master, if the disciple is already like this, how scary would his master be? Even our 3 holy lands are no match for this great enmity. Even if we can succeed, we'll have to pay a heavy price. Which side is he from? Could it be someone from the Misty Mansion? What we need to do now is to rush back to Gold City as soon as possible. Du Ju made a prompt decision. Order the intelligence department to increase their efforts and keep an eye on June Moxie's movements at all times. Do not let go of even the slightest bit of movement. We must gather the elite forces of the 3 holy lands to the Silver Blizzard City on the 2nd day of the 2nd month of spring. That would be the best opportunity to kill the Xian Beast Kings of Tian Fa. And, it would also be the best opportunity to deal with June Mo Xia. After all, you must strike a fatal blow when dealing with an opponent like June Mo Xia. That's because he won't give his opponent a second chance to threaten his life. In addition, June Moxie and the June family are irreconcilable enemies with the Tian Xiang imperial family. If possible, create some trouble for him in the secular world. Even if he doesn't have a weakness, we must create one. Restrain him. We can't let him develop too quickly. Focus on June Moxie himself. The strength of the rest of the June family may not be weak in the eyes of the secular world, but they're nothing in the eyes of our 3 holy lands. We may be able to restrain him, but we're only allowed to get rid of that thief June. It doesn't matter even if we ignore the rest of the June family. Once the time is ripe, be ready to strike like a thunderbolt. Xiao Weiqing didn't understand what he was talking about, and could only nod in agreement. Chapter 654. The 9 consecutive days of death by 1,000 cuts finally came to an end. The Wu Hui army flag was once again standing proudly in the Tianxiang city, fluttering high in the sky. During these 9 days, the nobles and officials kept coming to the June family in waves, demanding that this unsightly show be stopped. Their reasons were endless, and every one of them was reasonable. However, June Mo Xia firmly refused them all. You have 1,000 reasons, but I have a set of rules. Those who squeaked too much were directly put down and beaten up. If they did not stop, their legs were directly broken. In this world where the fist was the biggest reason, the fist was the best reason. What's more, if this little drama was dissuaded, then the real drama would not be staged. The so-called real drama was naturally the thing that June Moxie had promised to do, complete the burial of Murong Xiu Xiu and Yi Gahan. Wasn't this decision even crazier? It could be said that it was the real craziness. The process of this drama was a classic, and it was wonderful from the beginning. The location of the mausoleum that June Moxie chose was the old site of the original Night Mansion. This place had been given to a minister by the emperor as a mansion, and it was not far from the palace. June Moxie did not spend much effort to buy this mansion and raise it to the ground. June Moxie's method was very simple and rough, and even a little overbearing. He just put 2 5 million silver notes in front of the official surnamed Gu, and then gave him two choices: first, take the money and find another place to live. Second, be raised and buried along with this mansion. Minister Gu, who had already left his post, was quite quick-witted. He didn't even bat an eyelid as he readily agreed and immediately started to move everything away. Speaking of which, the construction cost of this residence was at most 4 or 5 million taels of silver, and it was extremely difficult to cash in. Now, the other party had directly offered 10 million taels of silver, which was 10 million taels of silver in real money. He had made a huge profit. Besides, the things in the mansion could be moved away by himself, and he just had to buy another mansion. Why not? Besides, even the emperor had to give way to June Moxie now. He did not have 3 heads, so why should he fight with him? He was in the limelight, and in the future, he might be able to find a way out for his descendants. Such a favor was worth it no matter what. Therefore, Lord Gu was very happy. The relocation of such a large residence only took a total of less than 2 days. Just as official Gu moved away the last item and walked less than 10 meters out of the door, he suddenly heard a loud boom. Turning around, he was shocked to find that the row upon row of huge houses, a continuous stretch of hundreds of houses, had suddenly collapsed at the same time, turning into broken beams and broken walls. All that was left was a stretch of ruins. Cold sweat broke out all over Lord Gu's body. If he didn't move quickly, then in this ruin. Thinking of this, Lord Gu didn't even turn his head back as he hurriedly left, leaving behind a body of cold sweat. At night, June Moxie came to this place. The Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer division guarded the place impenetrably. June Moxie wore a white robe and stood in the middle of the ruins. The night was boundless, and it looked somewhat hazy. June Moxie stood in the middle of the ruins, his face exceptionally solemn. The corpses of Yi Gohan and Murong Xiao Xiao, the pair of infatuated lovers, were in a huge bronze coffin behind him. June Mo Xia slowly stretched out both of his hands. His hands suddenly glowed with an earthen yellow radiance. He waved his hands lightly and waved them out. Under the illumination of this mysterious earthen yellow radiance, the broken walls and broken tiles were quickly turned into dust. The messy ground actually became smooth and flat in an instant. It was so bright that one could see one's reflection in it. June Moxie clasped his hands together and separated them again. In front of him, a tomb several feet deep suddenly appeared. The bronze coffins of Yi Gohan and Murong Xiao Xiao mysteriously floated up from the ground and slowly fell to the bottom of the tomb without a sound. June Moxie waved his hands, and the tomb instantly closed again. This pair of lovers were finally buried together in the same tomb. Finally, their long-cherished wish was fulfilled. May your souls go to the netherworld and reunite in Fengdu. Holding your hand, we will never abandon each other for 3 lifetimes. June Moxie still stood motionless. However, there was a huge stone tablet in front of him. It was like a tall tree that was growing at an extremely fast speed. It rose straight up to a height of 100 feet, square and huge. At the top, there was a dragon and a phoenix facing each other from a distance. The atmosphere was heavy and dignified. Between the dragon and phoenix, there were 3 majestic characters that stood hollowed out, Tomb of Lovers. June Moxie's body slowly floated in the air. His fingertips glowed with an earthy yellow brilliance. He pondered for a moment and suddenly waved with force. On the stone tablet, fine stone chips flew out continuously. A few lines of flamboyant calligraphy instantly appeared on the smooth surface of the tablet. On the upper left side, I do not regret my deep love in this life. I am willing to wander alone. If fate does not end in the next life, I would rather betray the heavens than betray you. In the middle, the tomb of Yi Gahan and Murong Shou Shou. On the lower right side, Jun Moxie felt the deep love of these two, so he specially set up this tablet. May these two, in the next life and the next, for all eternity, grow old together, and never be separated. In the sky, they can be lovebirds; on earth, they can be intertwined branches. There will always be an end to the sky and the earth, but this love will never end. This tomb is called the Tomb of Lovers, erected by Jun Moxie. If there are any offenders, 9 generations will be executed. Jun Moxie looked at the tall tombstone and said in a low voice, Yi Gahan, Murong Shou Shou, I have fulfilled your wishes for you. No matter how bitter you were when you were alive, you are finally reunited after death. Since this tablet has my name on it, I will not let anyone disturb your peace. This is also the last thing I can do for you. Jun Moxie stood up and thought for a while. Then, he placed 2 huge stone lions in front of the tomb. Then, with Jun Moxie's footsteps, stone steps appeared one by one in a steady but abrupt manner. Jun Moxie's right hand flickered with a lush green light, and the entire graveyard was suddenly covered with pine and cypress trees. It was lush and verdant, and the entire area was covered with pine and cypress trees. The tombstones of Yi Gahan and Murong Shou Shou were placed in the center. Jun Moxie looked back one last time and sighed. Then, he bowed, mounted his horse, and left. The Tomb of Lovers. Just as Jun Moxie expected, the sudden appearance of this magical Tomb of Lovers caused an uproar on the second day of its completion. First, it was still a towering mansion yesterday, but today, it had become a huge tomb with pine and cypress trees. This magical phenomenon naturally caused the people in the city to be inexplicably surprised. Secondly, it was because of the 2 names on the huge tombstone. Few people knew who Yi Gahan was, but everyone knew who Murong Shou Shou was. Wasn't that the name of the current empress? Why was she buried here? Moreover, she was married to someone else. What the hell was going on? In the palace. The emperor kicked over the stool with one leg and then fiercely threw all the things on the table onto the ground. Following that, he kicked the table, sending it flying. His eyes were red with anger as he roared loudly, Men, flatten this tomb of affection for me. Flatten it no matter what. What qualifications does this bastard Yi Gahan have? What qualifications does he have? Murong Shou Shou. Bitch. Bitch, bitch, bitch. I want both of you to not be able to rest in peace even in death. Meet each other. I will definitely grind your corpses into ashes. One will be buried at the bottom of the vast ocean, and the other will be scattered on the peak of a towering mountain. You will never be able to meet each other again. Groups of royal guards whipped their horses and galloped through the streets to tear down this tomb of lovers. The tomb that was like a thorn in the emperor's flesh. These small fries were not worthy of being personally attended to by Jun Dashao. Of course, the people in charge of attending to these guards were not low-level either. Because, the people who received them were from the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer. Based on the current strength of these people, any one of them was basically at Tian Xian's level. With such a lineup, how could they be low-level? One side insisted on tearing down the tomb, while the other side followed orders to defend it. In the center of Tianxiang City, there was no need to say anything. The result was obvious. Even the weakest member of the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer was at the peak of the Earth Xian realm. Furthermore, there were 300 of them gathered together to form a large-scale battle formation. How could these ordinary soldiers be a match for them? There were not many peak Earth Xian experts in the entire Tianxiang Empire, not to mention the even stronger Tian Xian experts. Those with such skills would have already gone to the Jianghu or established their own sections. Who would be so bored as to waste their time in the army? Therefore, in just a short period of time, the ground was already littered with broken limbs. This was also thanks to Jun Moxie's order not to kill anyone. The Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer were cautious and held back. Therefore, there were no casualties. Even so, in just one morning, nearly 10,000 people were injured or disabled. This was a rather terrifying number. The emperor was not discouraged despite losing the first battle. The millions of soldiers of the Tianxiang Empire could not even flatten a small tomb. Even if the Jun family does not listen to my orders, what about the other families? Are they going to rebel with the Jun family? I don't believe it. It can't be that the other families are like the Jun family, who have the backing of a peerless expert. Everyone in the family is like Shenxian, right? Then, he issued an edict for the Duge family to send out their troops. However, old man Duge Zongheng suddenly fell ill. It was said that he was already in a coma. It was simply incurable. He was only one more breath than a dead man. In such a situation, he naturally could not lead the troops. Moreover, it was not only old man Duge Zongheng who fell ill. Even General Duge Wudi fell ill. Although it was not to the point of incurable, he was vomiting and having diarrhea. He could not get out of bed. As for going into battle, it was even worse. Chapter 655. The women of the Duge family were extremely busy. It was said that nearly half of the physicians in the capital had been invited to the Duge family. They were served with good food and drinks, and their diagnoses were getting more and more serious. From an outsider's point of view, the Duge family would definitely have funerals tomorrow, and not just one or two, but more than 10. As soon as the report of sick leave was submitted, His Majesty the Emperor was furious on the spot. He almost fainted on the spot due to a heart attack. Then, Grand Preceptor Li claimed to be ill, admitting that he was old and frail, and that it was difficult for him to take on such a heavy responsibility. It was said that Master Meng had caught tetanus last night and really couldn't get up. In short, all the important ministers of the imperial court were bedridden this morning. According to the report, these people did not seem to be pretending, and they were really miserable. After the emperor was furious, he finally thought of one person, Murong Fengyun. This was his father-in-law. He was Murong Xiu's biological father. If he did not care, who would? Whether from an official's point of view, Murong Fengyun was the most suitable person to deal with this matter. But when Murong Fengyun received the news, his hands trembled, and he almost fell. Then he opened his eyes and shouted, Xiu is dead? When did this happen? Why didn't I know about this? Murong Fengyun immediately went to the palace to see the empress, and was told that the empress had gone out late at night 10 days ago and had not returned. Old Master Murong went directly to the emperor, full of bewilderment. In the end, he only received a series of hesitant and unclear explanations. The only thing that was clear was that the emperor wanted him to topple Murong Xiu and Yi Guhan's graves first. Everything else could be discussed later. Jun family. Hearing the sounds of fighting coming from outside, Jun Wui shook his head and smiled bitterly. Emos, yeah, you've crossed the line this time, aren't you a little too much? Jun Emos, yeah, who was reading the classic of mountains and seas with great interest, flipped a page, and casually said, is it out of line? Is it too much? I don't think so. This is a well-prepared deterrence. If there wasn't so much blood spilled, there would still be people who would go and destroy it. Make a scene, the bigger the better. It's just a few more people dying. Tian Guanlin had over 100,000 people lying there unjustly. How many people had died in Tianxiang City? Far from it. Grandpa Jun, who was half reclining on his armchair, sighed and did not say anything. At this moment, a guard suddenly reported, the Murong family's patriarch, Murong Fengyun, is here to see old Master Jun. The main character is finally here. Jun Moxie and Jun Wui said at the same time. Jun Zhantian, this old man wants an explanation from you. Murong Fengyun stormed in and said, old man, I understand that you want to take revenge for your son, so I didn't make things difficult for you. But, your Jun family has been making a ruckus for 9 days now, and all the murderers have been put to death. So, you should have had enough by now, right? Even if it's not enough, you can continue messing around. Why do you have to ruin my daughter's reputation? After all, Xiao is the queen of a country, the mother of the world. How can she be humiliated like this? Humiliation? Old man Murong, why do you say that? Jun Zhantian said calmly. Fine. I only ask you, my daughter. My daughter. Xiao, is she dead? Is her body buried in the grave of passion? Murong Fengyan's eyes were red. Although he was a hero, he was still a father. His own daughter's fate was unknown, but someone had erected a tombstone. How could he not be angry? How could he not be sad? Yes. Jun Moxie interrupted calmly. Old Master Murong, your daughter was indeed killed outside the Jun residence 10 days ago. My third uncle and I saw it with our own eyes. She's really dead. Xiao. Murong Fengyan's body trembled, and he suddenly roared, how did she die? Who killed her? The old man's voice was hoarse, as if his throat was torn. The person who killed her was one of the people I killed with 1,000 cuts, Chu Feng said. Jun Imo Xia said slowly, you should know this person. I'm sure you are not unfamiliar with him. He is Mr. Wen Songyu. Wen Songyu. It's him. How could it be him? Murong Fengyan's eyes flashed, and his face turned pale. His tall and straight body could not stand steadily, and he slowly sat down. He did not notice that there was no chair behind him, and sat directly on the ground. Hearing this name, he could guess how Murong Xiao died, and who was the mastermind behind it. This was a matter that was completely obvious. Impossible. How could it be him? Murong Fengyan raised his head ferociously, and roared hysterically, you lied to me. Is it impossible? Princess Raimu saw the assassination with her own eyes. At this moment, she is still in a coma, recuperating from her injuries in my residence. There were also more than 100 guards who protected the Murong clan lady that night. Even though many of them had died while they were trying to save her, nearly half of them were lucky enough to survive. They are still here. They are all soldiers of the Murong family. Can their testimonies be counted? If you still have any doubts, there are also Lord Divine Eagle, Solitary Eagle, and Fierce Gale Sword God, Feng Wanyan. Jun Imo Xia replied calmly, if Old Master Murong feels that it is necessary, you can ask them to come out and speak. Old Master Murong will believe their words, right? Murong Fengyan's face was dull, and he was about to go crazy. He could also hear that Jun Imo Xia had addressed his daughter as Miss Murong, and not Her Majesty the Empress. He could also guess the reason behind it. After asking everyone, he finally accepted the fact that his daughter was dead. In an instant, he seemed to have aged more than 10 years, and tears flowed down his cheeks. His son-in-law sent someone to kill his daughter. When this cruel reality was placed right in front of him, the old man immediately broke down. But, my daughter is the Empress. Why did she have to be buried with that lowly Yi Guhan? Murong Fengyan suddenly shouted in grief and jumped up. Lowly? Master Murong, have you ever asked your own daughter about this? Did you ever ask her if she wanted to stay in the imperial palace and be the empress of the world? Or would she rather follow Yi Guhan to the ends of the world? The corners of Jun Imo Xia's mouth curled into a mocking smile. Do you know who your daughter likes? Master Murong, if you didn't mention this, I wouldn't have mentioned it either. But now that you mention it, it makes me look down on you. I look down on you from the bottom of my heart. Murong Fengyan sat down dejectedly. He suddenly remembered his docile daughter holding a knife to her own neck and the bright blood stain. Father, please help me. I'm willing to follow little Han. Even if I have to live in the wilderness, wander the world, I have no regrets. Please fulfill your daughter's wish. That crazy look in her eyes, that stubborn love, was still fresh in his mind, but his daughter was no longer in this world. Daughter. Our Murong family is at the end of our rope. Fortunately, His Majesty has taken a liking to you. This is the only chance for the thousands of people in our family to make a comeback. Your father is old, and I don't have the heart to support the entire family. Your elder brothers are in their prime, and your younger brothers are still young. Do you really have the heart to follow Yi Guhan and let the entire family be destroyed? Do you really want your family to be beheaded? Help me, help your brothers, and help the entire Murong family. That was what he had told his daughter in the past. His daughter did not know that the Murong family was already deeply rooted at that time. There was no such thing as a crisis. But she, who was naive, chose to believe in her father. In the end, she let go of the knife in her hand. Even if I know that you're lying to me, I can't take this risk. I can't bear to part with this family. I've accepted my fate. These were his daughter's words at that time. To this day, he could still remember how his daughter cried for several months after that incident. That pitiful cry seemed to have pierced into his heart when he thought about it now. Before she got married, her face was filled with despair, and her dispirited expression was like dead ashes. The only dowry she brought with her was that handkerchief. It was him who broke up his daughter's beautiful marriage with one hand and pushed his daughter into that cold palace with the other. He thought that he had found the best home for his daughter because of this, but in the end, it led to the tragedy of her life. Murong Fengyun sat on the ground and suddenly burst into tears. In front of his eyes, amidst the glistening tears, it seemed like his daughter was still wailing, crying her heart out as she hugged her leg. Daddy, please let me and little Han be together, please let me and little Han be together. He remembered that it was also winter at that time. He was wearing thick clothes, but his daughter's tears had soaked his pants and made him feel a chill from the bottom of his heart. He remembered that his daughter had not smiled in the past few years. She would often stare blankly at a certain place. She would occasionally come home, but she would come and go in a hurry. It was as if there was only endless pressure in the house. It was Miss Murong Xiu's last wish to be buried together with Yi Guhan. Do you want to destroy her last wish as well? June Moxie Lengleng's voice came. The Murong family has used her for a lifetime. She had been used in exchange for countless riches and glory, in exchange for everything that others could never obtain in a lifetime. Now that she's dead, Master Murong, don't tell me that you still want her to marry the person who killed her with his own hands. Murong Fengyun raised his head in shock. In his tears, he seemed to see his daughter in a red wedding dress shouting, "Father, please let me go. Father, please let me go." He closed his eyes and 2 streams of tears rolled down his cheeks. Master Murong absent-mindedly left the June residence, completely at a loss. He had no idea where he was going. Suddenly, he heard shouts in front of him. He walked over and found that he had inadvertently arrived at the grave of the lovers. This is the resting place of my daughter." He urged his horse forward with a blank look in his eyes. When the soldiers saw Murong Fengyun, they all made way for him. The Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer soldiers guarding the grave were about to stop him when a voice said, "Let him pass." Chapter 656. Murong Fengyun arrived in front of the tombstone and got off his horse, but he staggered. Looking at the towering tombstone, he saw the words on it through his blurry eyes. "I don't regret my deep love in this life. I'm willing to wander alone. If fate does not end in my next life, I would rather betray the heavens than betray you." Xiu, my dear daughter, are you really going to die?" Murong Fengyun stood there, motionless. His white beard fluttered in the cold wind, and his tears fell to the ground. He just stood there, his right hand gently stroking the tombstone, as if he was comforting his young daughter. In front of the tomb, the fighting stopped, and all eyes were on him. Suddenly, Murong Fengyun roared, "Xiu! If you die like this, how do you expect me to live?" His voice was filled with pain and intense pity, as if his own daughter was standing in front of him again. She was still the same as she was 18 years ago, still looking at him with such a pitiful expression. He sighed and suddenly reached out his hand. Dark blue Tian Xian Chi came out, and as his hand fell, stone chips flew. On the side, there was another line of small words. My beloved daughter, Murong Xiao Xiao, rests here forever. Father, Murong Fengyun, stands. Then, he stared blankly for a long time, and finally sobbed. He covered his withered face with both hands, jumped on his horse, and left. He lay on the horse's back, and never looked back again. This stubborn old man did it in the end. Even though he did not recognize Yi Guhan as his son-in-law, he still broke off his daughter's engagement. He did not recognize his daughter's empress position anymore. He only erected a tombstone for his daughter. The cold wind blew, and the pines rustled like the sea. It seemed like Murong Xiao Xiao was saying her final farewell to her father. After Murong Fengyun returned home, he immediately issued an order: all officials in the Murong family were to resign immediately. From now on, the Murong family would have nothing to do with the world's disputes and power struggles. Anyone who disobeyed would be beaten 80 times and expelled from the family. However, Murong Fengyun's addition meant that Murong Fengyun and the Murong clan had acknowledged this grave. It acknowledged the existence of this tombstone. He had accepted this seemingly absurd fact. The remaining imperial guards quietly withdrew. Because if they didn't leave now, they would have to face death and slaughter. Jun Moxie announced that from this moment on, there would be no mercy. From then on, the Grave of Passion became a major attraction of Tianxiang City. From this moment on, the huge tombstone would stand tall for 10,000 years. The evil monarch had personally established it. Even after 10,000 years, no one would dare to touch it. This also became a great miracle left by the evil monarch in the human world thousands of years later. Because the whole graveyard and the tombstone were completed in an instant by evil Prince Jun Moxie alone. Tens of thousands of years later, the continent produced many experts, but no one was able to achieve such a legendary feat. Ordinary people came here to pay homage, but the experts came here and all of them were amazed, guessing how the evil monarch had done all of this. This had already surpassed what people could do, or even the greatest scope of guesses. Not long after the battle, someone set up another tombstone next to it, which detailed the life course of Yi Guhan and Murong Xiao Xiao, as well as their earth-shattering love. The Grave of Passion made countless lovers shed tears in front of this tombstone. Some young men and women in the future would come here every time it was time to talk about marriage. They prayed that this pair of lovers could fulfill their marriage, and hoped that their feelings could be like theirs, unchanging in life and death, never changing. Tianxiang City was in turmoil, and the entire Xian continent was also in turmoil. In the far north, in the Blizzard Silver City, where another super family was located, his heart was filled with anxiety. Xiao Xingyun looked at the snowflakes of information in front of him and sighed helplessly. He regretted that he didn't kill them all those years ago, causing him to attract such a disaster today. How could they resist the power of the Jun family? The mysterious expert had caused a total of 90 experts from the 3 Holy Lands to be defeated in one fell swoop. The number 1 king of Tianfa, Venerable Mei, turned out to be that little bastard Jun Moxie's woman. All these ridiculous things had happened to Jun Imo Xia, and no one dared to believe it, but they had no choice but to believe it. And the letters he wrote to the 3 Holy Lands asking for help had not received any reply. As for the people he sent, there was no news either. Xiao Xingyun hadn't been able to eat or sleep well these past few days. Don't tell me that my Xiao family is so close to unifying the Silver Blizzard City. Is it going to be destroyed? Han Zhanmeng, the lord of the Blizzard Silver City, had been asking about the whereabouts of the group of people who had gone out. After all, it was too outrageous that they did not return to the Blizzard Silver City for the new year, especially when the little princess, Han Yanmeng, was among them. Although there were messages from the fake third elder and the others, Han Zhanmeng still felt that something was wrong. What could be more important than returning to the mountain for the new year? Moreover, little Meng had been gone for so long. How could she not miss her parents when she was so attached to them? How could she stay outside for so long? It was the new year. Even her father, who had been in seclusion for a long time, had come out. But he kept saying that he was busy and could not come back, and that he would only be back in spring. Could it be that something went wrong somewhere? Also, the Jun family said that they were coming to take revenge on the Shao family. Was this true? In short, during this period of time, the atmosphere in the Silver City was not right. So during this period of time, Han Zhanmeng had been visiting the intelligence department a lot more often, which made the Shao family even more fearful. They were afraid that Han Zhanmeng would discover something, and that would be terrible. Now was not the time when they wanted to exterminate the entire Han family. Facing a strong enemy like the Jun family and Jun Imosia, it was always good to have a little more help, not to mention a strong ally like the Han family. Today, Han Zhanmeng came again. Because he suddenly had doubts about the intelligence office of the Shao family. Even if he was really busy, his youngest daughter should have written a letter back. Ever since she left, little Meng had only sent a letter twice, and since then, there was no news from her. No matter how busy she was, she should have time to write a letter, right? Besides, no matter how busy she was, could she be busy? Everything was strange. Great Elder, you are here too. Is there any news recently? Han Zhanmeng's handsome face was expressionless as he greeted him lightly. My lord. Shao Xingyun straightened his back. Although he was over 100 years old, he was still tall and straight. His eyebrows were sharp, and his face was devoid of wrinkles. If it were not for his white hair, others would have thought that he was a handsome man in his 30s or 40s. The recent news is not good for our Blizzard Silver City. Shao Xingyun sighed. The Jun family is coming aggressively. It seems that they are confident. Our Silver City is on the brink of crisis. Oh, it's still about the Jun family? Han Zhanmeng frowned, feeling a little impatient. You know what I'm asking about, but you're using the Jun family to brush me off. Besides, the Jun family is looking for revenge against the Shao family. What does it have to do with the Blizzard Silver City? That's right, the Jun family has the support of the Beast Kings of Tian Fa this time. Shao Xingyun looked up to the sky and sighed. My lord, it seems that we are going to face a tough battle this time. We must be fully prepared. Han Zhanmeng interrupted him and asked, has there been any news from the third elder in the past 2 days? Shao Xingyun smiled and said, My lord, you came at the right time. The third elder's letter just arrived. Everyone has been working hard, especially the little princess. She complained in the letter that she needs to come back soon. I estimate that she will be back in 10 or 20 days at most. Let me see it. Han Zhanmeng was excited. Han Zhanmeng looked at the letter, which had almost 1,000 words and took 7 or 8 pages. He flipped through the pages one by one until he saw his daughter's message. It was not written by her, but by someone else. She said that the little princess was very naughty and homesick, and that she missed her parents. She even cried one night. The subordinates were in fear and trepidation, and were trying their best to resolve this matter as soon as possible and return to the Blizzard Silver City. Han Zhanmeng's doubts did not disappear after he finished reading. Instead, they increased. Something was not right. If she could write 1,000 words and 7 or 8 pages, why couldn't Meng insert a page and write it herself? Why did she have to let someone else write for her? She kept saying that she missed the Blizzard Silver City and wanted to return, but she delayed it for several months. The elders of the Blizzard Silver City had always been swift and decisive in their work. When had they ever delayed things like this? According to the letter, there were no casualties among the subordinates of the Blizzard Silver City. That was even more wrong. Since it could cause such a big problem, how could there be no casualties? Wasn't it too smooth? If it was so smooth, why didn't they deal with it for a long time and didn't return? Han Zhanmeng was silent for a long time after he finished reading the letter. However, he gradually tightened his grip on the letter until his knuckles turned white. The ominous premonition that had been lingering in his heart for a long time suddenly became stronger and stronger. He stood quietly for a long time before he slowly said, Great Elder, what do you think of this news? His back was facing Shao Xingyun when he said this. His tone was flat, and even carried a hint of a smile. It was as if he was chatting peacefully and peacefully. I also feel that something is not right. However, as long as there are no casualties, it's a good thing. It's possible that they only report the good news and not the bad news. Xiao Xingyun frowned and thought deeply. Xiao Xingyun frowned as he pondered deeply. He then said, however, many people have gone out this time. Their strength is also considerable. But, they haven't returned even after such a long time. It seems that the difficulties they've encountered aren't as simple as they've been described in the letter. This is inevitable. This old man is also somewhat suspicious. Or perhaps they are trapped by worldly forces, and are afraid of losing face. This. If you put it this way, it makes some sense. But, how could Meng and not have sent back any news? What is the reason for this? Han Zhanmeng's doubts were slightly reduced when he heard this. Could it be like this? Xiao Xingyun suddenly slapped his thigh as if he had suddenly realized something. Then, he stammered and found it difficult to speak. Like this? What? What did you think of? Han Zhanmeng turned around and looked at Xiao Xingyun sternly with his sharp eyes. This old man is just guessing. After all, there is no news from the little princess, and it's the end of the year. This is really abnormal. Xiao Xingyun looked embarrassed. What did you think of? Tell me quickly. Han Zhanmeng was a little annoyed and waved his sleeves heavily. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.